Chapter 2882. If it weren't for me, he wouldn't have died. It's all my fault. Xianxia was utterly defeated and burst into tears. Yu Yu's heart ached when he heard that. Uncle Xianxia was dead. He was even more worried that Mommy would live in guilt forever. In this world, the heaviest and most unbearable thing was guilt. He was grateful for Gu Xingzia's sacrifice, and his heart ached for Uncle Xingzia's devotion to Mommy. However, his heart ached even more for Mommy, who would forever live in self-blame. Xianxia pursed her lips and her tears fell uncontrollably. She choked and said, "At least let me see him one last time. At least let me see him again. It's okay if I can't see him." Hua Jin took a deep breath and said, "Okay, I'll think of a way." 20 minutes later. Hua Jin helped Xianxia to the door of the morgue. Based on Qin Zhou's verbal instructions, the two of them were let in as usual. Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen were left outside. Xianxia couldn't see anything. Hua Jin helped her to a place and stopped in his tracks. She knew that the place beside her was probably where Gu Xingzia was parked. Xianxia sucked in a breath of cold air. Only then did she reach her hand in slowly. Her fingertips came into contact with a frightening coldness. It was so cold. It was unbelievable. Why would a person's skin become so cold after losing their body temperature after death? Touching such cold skin, Xianxia found it even harder to suppress the pain in her heart. Tears were about to fall again. Xingzia. Thousands of words escaped from her throat, but it was filled with guilt. "I'm sorry." She collapsed to the ground weakly and knelt by the bed. She fumbled around and grabbed his curled hand. His slender fingers were extremely cold, without any warmth. She grabbed his hand, but she couldn't get anything in return. Her heart was filled with anticipation. In the next second, he quietly held her hand. Then, he sat up from the bed and smiled mischievously. He scratched her nose and told her, "I'm just teasing you, little fool." She would never be angry. However, all these seemed to be wishful thinking. She knew that he would never wake up again. But she still had a lot to say to him. Thousands of words were stuck in his throat. He couldn't say them, and it was hard for him to swallow them. "Xingzia," Xianxia sobbed. "Wake up. Just give me a few seconds. I just want to tell you that I will never forget you." "Will you forget me? In your heart, will you retain even a second of my memory?" Of course, of course." Xianxia was extremely regretful. She shouldn't have said that and let him misunderstand. However, she thought that if she said that, he would close his eyes unwillingly. Unexpectedly, he believed her and left with regrets. She couldn't bear to. She wanted to tell him, "I won't forget you." "Xingzia, can you hear me? Can you hear me?" Xianxia said humbly, "I'm willing to use 10 years of my life in exchange for a glance from you. Open your eyes and look at me, okay?" When Hua Jin saw this, he couldn't bear it. He thought that the name Gu Xingzia would probably be engraved in her heart forever. He reached out to hug her, but he heard her cry even more heart-wrenchingly. "Xingzia! Xingzia!" When he heard her cry, his heart felt like it was being stabbed. Chapter 2883. Don't be sad, okay? My heart aches when I see you like this. Xianxia could not stop crying and sobbing. She did not seem to be the type of person who would cry to the heavens and the earth. She clung to the edge of the bed and gripped the bed sheets tightly, crumpling them into a ball. She gritted her teeth and tried to hold back her tears, but she could not control them at all. It was as if the world had completely collapsed. One look and one could tell how desperate she was at this moment. She kept feeling that everything in front of her was a dream. She cried enough and woke up from her dream. When she woke up, Gu Xingzia was still alive. However, every time she closed her eyes, the scene in the parking lot would replay itself. Every time she thought about how Gu Xingzia was in her arms and how he struggled to open his eyes and say those words with great difficulty, his weak but smiling expression seemed to say, Sure, please don't be sad. I don't regret it." However, she regretted it. She was sad. She would break down. She did not believe that Gu Xingzia had died just like that. He had really died just like that. She also did not believe in the nonsense that people would go to heaven after they died. When people died, they really did not exist anymore. However, there were so many beautiful things in this world that he had never experienced. His life should not have come to an abrupt end just like that. When he flew to America, it might have been the beginning of a new life. He might have welcomed a new life with a girl who loved him and he loved her too. The two of them met, got to know each other, fell in love, and finally held hands for the rest of their lives. In her heart, Xianxia had always left a beautiful image of her. He deserved to be happy. He deserved to be happy. But now, it was just as Xianxia had said. He came to this world coldly and lived coldly. In the end, he fell asleep coldly and was alone for the rest of his life. Xianxia was crying like a madwoman. She was crying in despair. Even though she didn't cry herself hoarse, she was on the verge of collapse. Huajin finally couldn't take it anymore. His eyes reddened as he knelt down beside her and hugged her shoulders. He hugged her tightly and said painfully, "Sister, if I can bear it for you, I'm willing to bear it for you. But don't force yourself like this, okay?" Hot tears fell on her shoulders. Huajin also began to cry sadly. The dead cannot be brought back to life. No one would have expected such a thing to happen. I know that Senior Xianxia likes you and cherishes you in his heart. Even if he were to do it all over again, I think he would still make the same choice. However, he definitely doesn't want you to punish yourself like this. It's not your fault. Why don't you let yourself go? Let yourself go? She cried and shook her head, unable to say a single word. She cried and so did he. She cried because she was sad that Xianxia had left. He cried because he suddenly realized that Xianxia would definitely become a thorn in her heart. This thorn would probably never be removed, and with every breath, the pain would be deep in her heart. However, he definitely couldn't allow her to continue crying like this. Not to mention her eyes, he couldn't let her tears fall. It was because he was worried about the unborn fetus in her stomach that he couldn't let her cry like this. Huajin hardened his heart and immediately used his hand as a knife. Xianxia only felt a pain at the back of her neck. Her vision suddenly turned black and she fainted. Chapter 2884. Huajin's heart ached as he gently caressed her face and rested his hand on her forehead. His heart ached terribly. When she was sad, he was sad too. The more she cried, the more he wished he could die for Xianxia. She wouldn't be that sad, would she? Just as he was letting his imagination run wild, there was a loud bang behind him. Wuxia broke through the door. Xianxia. He rushed through the door and saw the person in Huajin's arms. He was stunned and rushed over to take her from Huajin's arms. Xianxia. Wuxia gently caressed her face. It was terrifyingly cold and there was no sign of life. He couldn't help but frown. He looked up and asked, "What's wrong with her?" "Brother-in-law. Don't worry. She's just fainted temporarily." Huajin immediately explained. "She insisted that she wanted to see Senior Xianxia one last time, so I brought her here. But perhaps she couldn't accept reality, so she kept crying. I was worried that it would affect her body, so I knocked her out with a karate chop. She'll wake up after resting for a while." Upon hearing this, Wuxia glanced at the person lying quietly on the bed. Xianxia's eyes were closed quietly. The clothes on his body had been removed, and a white bedsheet covered up to his shoulders. His appearance had been tidied up. At first glance, it looked as if he had only slept for a short while. It was extremely quiet. Usually, people who died from serious injuries would die in an extremely hideous manner because of the immense pain. However, Xianxia's expression was very calm. No one knew what kind of dream he was having. Wuxia suddenly felt complicated. He didn't know how to feel about Xianxia. In the past, he probably only felt disgust towards him. But after this incident, he couldn't bring himself to hate this love rival of his. He had always thought that Xianxia's feelings for Xianxia were just a spur of the moment or that he was restless because he couldn't get her. Men's desire to conquer women and their careers were the most obvious. The more he couldn't get someone, the more intense his desire to conquer them would be. Wuxia thought that Xianxia's feelings for Xianxia were purely driven by his desire to conquer her. But she didn't expect this man's love to be so deep. He was actually willing to sacrifice himself. However, he couldn't care less right now. Wuxia carefully carried Xianxia in his arms and left in a hurry. Huajin followed closely behind. Yu and Xiao Yichen followed closely behind. When they arrived at the intensive care unit, Wuxia gently placed her on the bed and covered her with a blanket. Huajin also heaved a sigh of relief. "How is she?" Wuxia immediately asked. Hua Jin immediately repeated what the doctor had said. Finally, he observed Mu Yaja's expression and said slowly, Xianxia is pregnant. Do you know? She was pregnant. Mu Yaja suddenly turned his head and looked at him with a pair of sharp eyes. He seemed to be suspicious. What did you say? Hua Jin patiently repeated. She was found to be pregnant. The doctor said that she's about 7 weeks pregnant. Mu Yaja's entire body stiffened. He turned his head and looked at Xianxia. His eyes were filled with emotions and his expression was complicated. Pregnant. She was pregnant. This news made him both surprised and happy. However, he was still worried. Chapter 2885. He was worried that her emotions would be too unstable and she would not be able to make it through the first 3 months. The first 3 months were the most dangerous time for a pregnant woman. If she did not take care of the fetus well, the fetus would stop developing and might not even have a heartbeat during the first 3 months. Based on her emotions, if she continued to drip, the fetus would die prematurely. When that happened, it would be a huge blow to her. She was afraid that she would be sent straight to hell. Hua Jin seemed to have guessed what he was worried about and hurriedly comforted him. But, fortunately, the fetus is fine. If she recuperates well, her condition should be stable in a few weeks. Mu Yaja leaned on the bed and held her hand with heartache. He stabilized the back of her hand and gently pecked her fingertips. She will get better, he said softly. It was not clear if he was comforting Hua Jin or Xianxia. In the ward. When Xianxia woke up, her eyes were covered with heavy gauze. She could hear the doctor and Mu Yaja talking in a heavy tone. Mu Yaja sat by the bed expressionlessly and listened quietly. It was so quiet that there was almost no sound. Hua Jin stood beside him and listened attentively. His face was filled with nervousness and worry as he looked at the doctor anxiously. On the other hand, Yu and Xiao Yichen looked grave. Hua Jin looked haggard as he did not have a good night's rest. Mu Yaja looked the same. The doctor buried his head in writing a report, but his face was not as cold as a doctor. He carefully sized up Xianxia, who was lying on the bed, and looked at Mu Yaja with trepidation. He said with some regret, Mr. Mu Yaja, your wife's cornea was damaged by a sharp object. As a result, her eyesight is damaged and there is a high possibility that she will lose her sight. Hua Jin did not look too good after hearing that. His face was ashen, but he still had a glimmer of hope and asked tentatively, Doctor, what do you mean? What blindness? The doctor raised his head. Behind the thick lenses, there was a helpless look in his eyes. His tone was calm. It means that her vision value is only 0.03. Her eyes have almost lost all vision and cognition. She can only slightly perceive light. Hua Jin blacked out. Yu, who was standing at the side, staggered and almost lost his balance. Xianxia had already woken up. When she heard this conclusion, she could not help but clench her fists. Her throat tightened. At that moment, his heart almost fell into the abyss of despair. She couldn't see, but she could clearly feel Mu Yaja holding her hand tightly, his fingertips trembling slightly. She also heard Hua Jin's heartbroken question. Then Xianxia's eyes can't be treated? Can't be cured? Not necessarily. If cornea transplantation can be considered, the sooner the better. After all, it is difficult to find donors in the medical institutions in China. Even if a suitable donor is matched, the surgery may not be successful. So, you have to be mentally prepared. However, considering that she is pregnant, the surgery can't be rushed. After all, as a pregnant woman, there is still a lot of risk in the surgery. On the bed, Xianxia's body suddenly froze. What? Pregnant? Pregnant woman. These words were so unfamiliar. What did they mean? She was full of doubts and forced herself to listen to the doctor more carefully. Chapter 2886. On the bed, Xianxia's body suddenly froze. What? Pregnant? Pregnant woman. These words were so unfamiliar. What did they mean? She was full of doubts and forced herself to listen to the doctor more carefully. Earlier, the doctor had said those words intermittently, so she didn't really listen. She only vaguely heard a few words. Cornea transplant, pregnant woman. There was a huge risk in the surgery. However, this series of words was enough to shock her and make it difficult for her to digest. Was she pregnant? Xianxia was so nervous that her whole body tensed up. Wuxia sensed the hidden meaning in the doctor's words and couldn't help but frown. What do you mean? The doctor deliberated for a moment and observed his expression. Suddenly he said slowly, my suggestion is that you can keep the child, but it might affect the cornea transplant surgery. After all, cornea donors are hard to come by. If you miss the opportunity, you might have to wait for a long time. In this way, if the surgery is delayed, you will inevitably feel regretful. Or you can keep the eye, abort the child as soon as possible, and perform the cornea transplant surgery as soon as possible. This is a safer plan. The doctor's cold words were still in their ears. However, those cold words undoubtedly pressed on their hearts, making the entire ward feel like it was covered in a layer of frost. Wuxia looked up and glanced at him. His tone was a little dangerous. Abort the child? Yes. The doctor said seriously, with her physical condition, the chances of her having children in the future are still very high. If the child is gone, she can have another one. However, if the cornea donor is missed, it's not something that can be obtained just because she wants it. Wuxia suddenly stood up and rushed to the doctor. He grabbed him by the collar and pressed him against the wall. The doctor only felt the back of his head hit the cold wall. His brain shook. When he opened his eyes again, he met Wuxia's cold and deep eyes. He couldn't help but be shocked. The cold gaze made him shudder. The doctor suddenly felt his hair stand on end. He was so scared that his voice trembled violently. Mr. Mu, let's talk nicely. Let's talk nicely. Wuxia coldly curled his lips and asked fiercely, whose child do you want to abort? Speak. Wuxia's blood had clearly rushed to his head. The cold aura on his body had completely spread throughout the ward, extending to every corner. I. The middle-aged man, who was almost in his 40s, was almost suffocated by Wuxia's dangerous gaze. Chairman Mu, please don't misunderstand. I'm doing this for your wife's sake. Is this for her sake? By aborting the child, you're forcing her to her death. Wuxia tightened his grip on his clothes. If he wasn't trying to control himself, he might have unconsciously strangled him. The doctor wanted to cry but had no tears. But, although it's cruel, these two plans are the most reliable. I warn you, don't even think about touching the child. The child must be saved. Right now, she couldn't bear another heavy blow. The doctor was so scared that he nodded repeatedly. Wuxia loosened his grip on the man, and the latter immediately scrambled out of the ward. Hua Jin vaguely heard movement from the bed. He turned his head and saw that Xianxia had woken up. She sat up and gently leaned against the back of the bed. Xianxia, you're awake. When Wuxia heard that, he looked back in shock but met her cold eyes. Chapter 2887. When Wuxia heard this, he turned around in shock and met her cold eyes. She couldn't see anything. She could only vaguely make out a black silhouette in the hazy light. However, this silhouette was too blurry. She didn't even know who this silhouette belonged to. Wuxia walked towards her slowly until he was right in front of her. He sat down on the side of the bed and leaned closer to her. Xianxia was indifferent and didn't react at all. She couldn't see him. She couldn't even see him walking towards her. Wuxia held her hand tightly. It was so sudden that she was startled and her body curled up slightly. It's me, he comforted her gently and placed his hand on the back of her hand. Sure, do you feel better? He asked tenderly. Are you feeling unwell? When Wuxia saw that she didn't say a word and was extremely quiet, his eyebrows furrowed even more. His heart ached as he kissed her fingertips. His throat was slightly hoarse. Sure, don't scare me. It's okay that you can't see. You still have me. But don't keep quiet. Xianxia opened her mouth, but her throat was hoarse from crying and she couldn't make a sound. Yu and Xianxia came over and stood on both sides of the bed. They looked at Xianxia worriedly. Mommy, say something. Yu choked and said, it's okay now. Yu, Xianxia, Daddy, and Uncle Hua Jin are all here to protect you. We won't let you get hurt again. Children were sensitive and knew that the person who had regained consciousness was probably still in a daze and was still in a state of panic. He comforted her immediately and hoped that she wouldn't be afraid again. Xianxia couldn't help but clench her fists. She bit her lip and lowered her head. The first words that came out of her mouth were 3 words. I'm sorry. Everyone was stunned. Hua Jin walked over and said angrily, Why are you apologizing for no reason? I'm sorry. Xianxia only cared about apologizing and kept saying, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I can atone for my sins in any way. I can even exchange my life for it. I'm sorry. Mu Yaja couldn't stand it and hugged her tightly. Xianxia, did you hear what the doctor said? Our child is in your womb now. Xianxia's eyes gazes and couldn't help but feel suffocated. Child. It turned out that what she had heard earlier was she. Was she really pregnant? Maybe it's a little princess, or maybe it's a mischievous little fellow. No matter if it's a boy or a girl, I like them all. I love them all. Hearing this news, I was pleasantly surprised. As he spoke, he hugged her shoulders and gently kissed her trembling lips. That's why you have to take good care of your body, okay? I'm sorry. Don't say sorry again. Mu Yaja's tone was full of pleading. You didn't do anything wrong. No one blames you. Don't say sorry. I don't want to hear it. Hua Jin also said, Xianxia, did you hear that? You have a Xiaobao baby. The baby is in your womb now. Chapter 2888. Yu added, but it's still very young, so we can't tell if it's a boy or a girl. It'll be great if it's a little princess. Daddy has always wanted a little princess. Xianxia said. Daddy said that he'll love both boys and girls. Yu immediately added. His clear eyes looked at Xianxia's tummy with curiosity and love. Then he said gently, I'll love Xiaobao a lot too. Mommy, I swear that I'll be a gentle brother and take good care of little sister. Xianxia teased. How do you know that it's a little sister? It's probably telepathy. Yu grinned and said, I'm guessing that the baby in Mommy's tummy is a little sister. Who asked Daddy to always want a little princess? Don't you like little sister too? Xianxia blushed strangely. Then he murmured, Yeah, I want a little sister. Although Xianxia could not see, she could still imagine the 2 children's expectant gazes when she heard that. Mu Yaja gently placed his hand on the back of her hand and called out to her gently, Xianxia, you still have me, Yu and Xianxia. You also have a 7-week-old baby in your tummy. She's very lucky and strong. The doctor said that it's a miracle that she was able to survive under such terrible circumstances. Xianxia's heart skipped a beat. She's very lucky. She's very strong. Xianxia's lips suddenly trembled. Her voice trembled as she said, At that time, the car almost hit me and ran me over. She couldn't help but recall that scene. As she held her cell phone, she felt the oppressive high beams of the car behind her blinding her eyes. If Xianxia hadn't pushed her to the side at the critical moment, she would have been crushed under the wheels of the car. Even though Xianxia had pushed her to the ground, he had taken all of her weight. Xianxia had pulled her into his embrace and used his back to take all the impact. Hence, the moment they landed on the ground, she clearly felt Xianxia's breath drop as he sucked in a painful breath. If it weren't for him, she wouldn't have been able to keep the baby in her tummy. If it weren't for him, she would have been rolled over and over by Yunna's car dozens of times. How much did Yunna hate her? Even when he was talking to her, he was gnashing his teeth in anger. He wanted nothing more than to turn into a ferocious beast, tear her into a million pieces, and chew her into his stomach. She didn't care about the consequences of her actions. She didn't care about the law. What she wanted was a life for a life. Yunna had always had the intention of perishing together with the enemy. Even if she died and was punished by the law, she wanted to drag them down to hell. Yun Yecheng was a good example. He was her biological father. She actually had the heart to splash him with sulfuric acid, and concentrated sulfuric acid at that. How cruel must she be to think of such a cruel method? What if it wasn't Xianxia? Chapter 2889. If it wasn't for Xianxia, I would have been the one lying on that bed right now. Xianxia clutched her chest in pain as tears rolled down her cheeks uncontrollably. Her heart ached so much that she couldn't breathe. She wasn't that fragile and didn't like to cry, but she just couldn't stop feeling sad. She really couldn't do it. She couldn't force herself to smile and live well after losing Xianxia. This was too cruel. Too cruel, she choked and said. He could have escaped. He knew that they had guns and bullets didn't have eyes. But he didn't run. He didn't have to protect me. That way, he wouldn't have been stabbed so many times. Sob, sob, sob. He still had a chance to live. Why did he end up like this? Mu Yaja hugged her with heartache as his eyes reddened. His heart ached terribly. Other than hugging her tightly in his arms and trying to feel her heartache, he couldn't say anything else. Hua Jin choked and said, Sure, don't keep thinking about this. Since it's already happened, let's turn the page and let bygones be bygones. The dead are gone, and the living are still alive. Xianxia is no longer around, so you have to cherish him even more. He must want you to be well and not torture yourself. But I can't figure it out, I can't understand. Xianxia couldn't stop crying. I can't understand, and I don't want to understand. I just want him to come back. Don't cry. Mu Yaja lowered his head and kissed her injured eyes through a layer of gauze. Sure, don't cry. Sleep well and don't let your imagination run wild. Ha! Don't let your imagination run wild. He knew that asking a heartbroken person not to cry and not to shed tears when they were in incomparable pain was crueler than cutting them into pieces. But she couldn't cry anymore. Every time her tears flowed out of her eyes, it was undoubtedly adding salt to the wound. He didn't want her to suffer this pain anymore. Yu rubbed her eyes and tried hard not to cry, but every time she saw her mother in pain, her heart ached even more. Everyone was flustered. After much difficulty, they finally managed to soothe her to sleep. After she fell asleep, the ward finally returned to silence. For a moment, it was quiet. Only then did the nurses enter the ward. The needle on her wrist had been removed, so she had to switch to another hand for the 4 drip. Mu Yaja kept hugging her as he lay on his side on the bed while she snuggled up in his embrace, using his arm as a pillow. Even though half his arm was numb from having to rest for a long time, he still couldn't bear to let her go. Just like that, he hugged her, guarded her, and looked at her. Xianxia did not sleep well. From time to time, her breathing would become rapid. Perhaps she was having a nightmare, but no one knew what she was dreaming of, for her forehead to break out in cold sweat. Yu fetched a basin of hot water and squeezed the towel dry. Then, she carefully wrapped the towel and helped her wipe off the cold sweat. Xiao Yichen stood by the side and quietly covered her with the blanket. The 3 of them had a clear division of labor. Hua Jin was tired after watching over her for the whole night and the whole morning. Hence, he lay on the bed to rest. He planned to wait until night-time when Mu Yaja was tired so he could take care of Xianxia for him. Chapter 2890. In the afternoon, Xianxia finally fell asleep. Hua Jin also woke up. The 4 of them didn't dare to leave for too long. They were hungry, so they ordered takeout. Hua Jin didn't know what to order. After consulting their opinions, he finally decided to order fast food. Firstly, it was fast. Secondly, it was hygienic with meat and vegetables. They were all starving. Even though Mu Yaja didn't say anything, he didn't eat breakfast or lunch. His stomach was growling. Hua Jin was a little nervous. He didn't know if Mu Yaja, with his noble status, would take a liking to the food he ordered. After all, he had a net worth of hundreds of billions. He rarely ordered fast food. Unexpectedly, when the food was delivered, he personally carried the lunchbox to the table like an ordinary person. He distributed the chopsticks and spoons one by one, held the lunchbox, and ate elegantly. It was Hua Jin's first time seeing a man eat so elegantly. He was like a noble. Even though he was holding an ordinary lunchbox, it gave him the feeling of a gentleman eating in a noble restaurant. Wasn't this man too perfect? Hua Jin muttered in his heart. He didn't even know how to hold the chopsticks next to him. Mu Yaja lowered his head and ate with heavy thoughts. Yun Na had been released on bail. He didn't pay much bail, and the police station didn't dare to take too much. The police station didn't have time to record this case, so it was perfect to cover it up perfectly. Yun Na was a missing person in the Household Registration Center. As long as her records were erased, she would be a missing person without any news. The reason he bailed Yun Na out wasn't because he wanted to do anything, nor was he planning to let her go. Instead, he planned to handle this matter personally. It wasn't that he didn't believe in the law. He believed that with the seriousness of the law, Yun Na's case should at least be a heavy death sentence. Moreover, what kind of sensational effect would the news of Gu Xing's death cause? This criminal case would definitely not be reduced to a simple one. Even though Huan Yu was still trying hard to keep this matter under wraps, They wouldn't easily announce the news of Gu Xing's death before the PR draft was released. Even though Gu Xing's fans were tormented by their guesses, it was impossible for them to announce his death so soon. However, he did not believe that the law could give him a satisfactory trial. Sometimes when dealing with evil, using violence to curb violence was the only way to be fair. At night, Xianxia still hadn't woken up. There were nutrients and tranquilizers in the intravenous drip. Since she hadn't woken up, Wuxia decided to go to the company. He had rushed over in a hurry and put down the board meeting that was halfway through. At this moment, matters, big and small, had probably piled up into a mountain. He had to assign tasks as soon as possible. Hence, he urgently summoned Lu Jinyu and Jianghu to the office. For the next few days, he had to stay in the ward until her emotions were stable enough. The company's affairs would be put aside for the time being. Hua Jin would take care of Xianxia on his behalf. However, not long after Wuxia left, Hua Jin finished washing the dishes and returned to the bedside. Suddenly, he heard hurried footsteps coming from the corridor. The heavy footsteps were fast and powerful. He thought that Wuxia had left something in the ward. He looked up at the door. The next second, the door was pushed open forcefully. A Gong Jia, who was dressed in black, pushed the door open and walked in nervously. Chapter 2891. Gong Jia, who was dressed in black, pushed the door open and walked in nervously. Why was it him? Hua Jin was extremely surprised to see him. There was no other reason. From what he remembered, Gong Jia had always liked white things. He had a head of silvery hair, a white suit and pants, and a white trench coat. This was something that left a deep impression on him. Most people who liked white had misophobia and were extremely picky about cleanliness. Gong Jia was a misophobe to the point of being perverted. However, today, he was dressed in black. His trench coat was not like before, where it was simply draped over his shoulders. Instead, it covered his entire body, as if he was trying to hide something. Gong Jia pushed the door open and walked in. He immediately saw Xianxia lying quietly on the bed. He looked nervous for a while and immediately rushed to the bed. "Sis," Hua Jin immediately said. She finally fell asleep. "Don't wake her up." Gong Jia looked at him and immediately stopped talking. All of a sudden, Hua Jin noticed a subtle movement. From the moment Gong Jia entered the room until now, he had been holding his left shoulder with his right hand. His originally handsome and devilishly handsome face was now extremely pale, as if he was enduring something. God knew that when Xianxia's phone was crushed by the car wheels and could no longer be reached, he did not care that he was still injured and was still recuperating. He immediately arranged for a flight and rushed over. Even though he was very resourceful, he was able to find the hospital where she was hospitalized without much effort. After finding out the ward, he rushed over. The hospital's elevator was always very congested. He could not wait for the elevator and ran all the way up the stairs. His forehead was still covered in sweat. When he ran, his movements affected the position of his wound. The wound probably split open a little and some blood seeped out, sticking to his clothes. This was also the reason why he deliberately changed into black clothes. If he wore white clothes, once the wound split open, it would be immediately obvious. Gong Jia sat on the side of the bed and leaned over to look at her. As soon as he entered the ward, he saw that Xianxia's eyes were covered with 2 layers of gauze and there was a trace of blood seeping through. He couldn't help but be shocked. Gong Jia turned his head abruptly and questioned Hua Jin. "What happened to her eyes? Are you hurt?" "Shh." Hua Jin immediately signaled him. "Don't be too loud." If it were any other time, if Hua Jin dared to order him like this, Gong Jia would definitely explode. He would even flip the bedside table. Alas, he had always been cautious when it came to Xianxia's matters, so he immediately lowered his voice obediently. "Is her eye injured?" Hua Jin's lips twitched. He felt that no matter what it was, as long as it involved Xianxia, Gong Jia would immediately turn from a mighty lion to an obedient and cute cat. This contrast was a little too great. Hua Jin immediately explained, "Her eyes are hurt, but other than that, she's mostly fine." "Eyes? Hurt? What exactly happened?" Gong Jia was halfway through his words when Yu walked into the ward from the balcony. Xiao Yichen also walked in. The 2 little lads washed their towels and hung them up to dry. When they saw Gong Jia, they were stunned. "Uncle?" Chapter 2892. Let's not bother about this for now. Gong Jie was not in the mood to explain this. He only wanted to know what was going on with the 2 layers of gauze on Yunxia's eyes. Yu Yu and Hua Jin looked at each other. From Hua Jin's words, Gong Jie roughly understood what had happened last night. Yu Yu explained again. Uncle Xianxia was stabbed 4 times in the abdomen and waist to protect mommy. 2 of the wounds were fatal, and he went into shock due to excessive blood loss. In the end, when he arrived at the hospital, he had already lost all signs of life. As for mommy, because of an accident, glass splashed into her eyes and cut her cornea. She might not be able to regain her normal vision for a while. Xiao Yichen's heart ached as he said, "Mommy cried so hard because of Uncle Xianxia. No matter how much we coaxed her, it was useless. She's probably sad." The doctor repeatedly reminded her not to cry or shed tears, but no one could persuade mommy. It wasn't easy for daddy to coax mommy to sleep, but she hasn't woken up yet. When Gong Jie heard this, his heart ached so much that it was about to bleed. He walked to the bedside and leaned over slightly. Looking at Yunxia's sleeping face, his slender fingers gently stroked the gauze. The bleeding spot made his heart clench. Perhaps it was because they were twins. He could completely empathize with the pain that she could endure. He could feel her despair, her helplessness, her loneliness, and her pain that she had no one to vent to. All of this was difficult for ordinary people to understand. After all, the needle wasn't pricked on their own body, so they wouldn't know how painful it was. However, he had a magical sense. He could sense all of her emotions. After all, before they were born, they were already protecting each other. "How long is she going to sleep for?" His voice was soft, as he couldn't bear to disturb her. "I hope that mommy can sleep a little longer. Otherwise, if she wakes up and keeps crying, it won't be good for her body. Her eyes are already like this, she can't cry anymore. Besides, if you keep crying, it won't be good for the baby in your tummy," Little Yi Chen added solemnly. Gong Jie was stunned. When she heard Xiao Yichen's last sentence, she couldn't help but fall into a daze. What? What baby? For a moment, he did not understand what was going on. Yu Yu said from behind, "Uncle, mommy is pregnant. There's a 7-week-old Xiao Bao baby in her stomach." She's pregnant? A look of surprise appeared on Gong Jie's face when he heard this. "Yes. The doctor said that mommy was 7 weeks pregnant. I also felt that it was strange. During that time, mommy's reaction was indeed a little abnormal. It was said that when she was filming on set, she had vomited a few times. I thought she had such a reaction because she was tired from filming." Yu Yu was a little annoyed. He should have reacted in time, but he was careless. He only hoped that mommy would give him and Xiao Yichen a little sister, so he didn't connect her abnormal reaction to the pregnancy. Gong Jie's gaze fell on her face. He doted on her. He even doted on the baby in her stomach, which was not even 2 months old. Fortunately, the heavens doted on her and the baby didn't die prematurely. It was saved. Thinking of this, Gong Jie's heart was more or less comforted. It's good that the baby is saved. Chapter 2893. After Gu Xing's death was pushed back 48 hours, many fans could no longer hold it in. They found out the address from somewhere and ran to the entrance of the hospital to wait. At this moment, it was already raining heavily. The downpour came suddenly and fiercely. Even so, it was difficult to extinguish the anxious hearts of the fans. Many fans rushed to the scene and found that the entrance of the hospital was already guarded by many media reporters. The hospital was brightly lit and was in a state of alert. Many people also realized that the hospital's security had been strengthened. The hospital had even deployed a lot of police officers from the Ministry of Public Security to maintain order at the scene. The fans were not stupid. The abnormal situation at the scene reminded them that the thing they were most uneasy about might not be a groundless accusation. Could it be true? Did something really happen to Master Xianxia? Impossible. How could it be true? I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Many fans waited for the official news for a long time. They were in a state of panic the entire night. Obviously, they were extremely afraid. At the same time, at Huan Yu's headquarters, the meeting room was brightly lit. Tonight was destined to be a sleepless night. Many of the higher-ups had expressions on their faces. Ji Lin sat in the chairman's seat. Beside him, Qin Zhou looked exhausted, but he still looked extremely serious. I believe everyone knows about Xianxia's matter. Right now, everyone is facing the biggest public relations crisis. First of all, this matter hasn't been investigated clearly. Before the truth is found out, we must not act rashly, and we must not announce to the media what happened. As for the media, Jianghu will be in charge of handling it. This time, no matter the price, we must suppress the storm as soon as possible. Many media reporters suspected that Xianxia had offended someone from the underworld, so he was assassinated. Assassinated? Jianghu glared. Nonsense. One of the higher-ups found it funny and said, offended the underworld. These media outlets didn't even ask around about the Gu family's background. How did they deduce such a ridiculous statement? Jianghu said unhappily, there's no need to say anything else. Some ridiculous statements are not worth responding to at all. Many media outlets are clowns who make fun of the public. In order to attract the public's attention, they don't even care about the most basic professional ethics. Yes, I understand. After an entire night of intense meetings, the next day, 3 days after Gu Xing's death, Huan Yu finally released official news. This time, however, it wasn't released through Weibo. In order to show the solemnity, Huan Yu directly published an obituary in the largest media and announced the news on their official website. The obituary was brief. The gist of it was that Gu Xingzi had met with an accident on his way to meet his friends. He had passed away in the wee hours of the previous night. The obituary was carefully worded and mournful. At the same time, it announced that there would be a grand memorial service in 2 days at Hongyang Funeral Parlor in Beijing. Many artistes had already secretly expressed that they wanted to participate in the obituary. Chapter 2894. At first, the fans thought that it was a prank by the company, an April Fool's Day prank. Many fans were deceiving themselves, unwilling to believe that the obituary was real. They even went to Huan Yu's official website to leave comments, scolding the website for being black-hearted for using such malicious words to create hype. Gu Xingzi said he was going to study for a master's degree in America. I think it must be a malicious attempt by the company to create hype. Although Gu Xingzi set up his own studio, he was still affiliated with Huan Yu. Now that he has left Huan Yu, such a big money tree has collapsed. The company won't let it go so easily. That's why they created such a damaging hype. They want to take advantage of Gu Xingzi's declining reputation to create more hype. This is too much. Just because Gu Xingzi insisted on leaving the entertainment industry, they can't disregard their years of friendship and do this, right? Xingzi is so pitiful. To be accidentally killed for no reason at all. How unlucky. However, the fans' self-deception was quickly slapped in the face. When many media outlets reposted the obituary on their official Weibo accounts, many A-list celebrities immediately stepped forward to repost it and post their condolences. Especially the directors and big-name producers who had worked with Gu Xingzi before. All the fans were scared out of their wits by this huge memorial. Just when they were still holding on to a faint glimmer of hope, Gu Xingzi's former manager stepped forward and posted a memorial obituary on Weibo. Goodbye, Xianxia. Once upon a time, when I first met you, I was stunned. I only thought of you as a handsome young man who had walked out of a painting. Melancholy, yet beautiful. You had a cold temperament that was hard to find in ordinary people, but your eyes revealed arrogance and loneliness. The first thing I wanted to do was to sign you. I think you're a rare talent. Some people were born to be the center of attention. Like you. In fact, time gave me the best answer. In the 10 years since your debut, as long as your name was mentioned, it was the best evidence. You were the idol of your generation, a fashion superstar, a genius in acting, and the youngest best actor of your generation. You were an irreplaceable legend. I was proud of you. I was proud of you. However, at this moment, I suddenly regret my decision. Perhaps if we hadn't met back then and you hadn't stepped into the entertainment industry, you wouldn't have fallen so quickly like a shooting star. Xianxia, do you know? Once upon a time, what was my expectation of you? I hope that you can win the most outstanding celebrity award, the world's best male artist award, the best actor award at every prestigious film festival, and the world's attention. I wish you were the king. I hope you become a legend that can never be surpassed. But, do you know what hope I have right now? Right now, I just want you to come back. It didn't matter that he was no longer the heavenly King Xianxia of the past. It didn't matter if he didn't have the glory and halo. It's good that you're back. It would be even better if you could start your life all over again. Even if these are difficult to achieve, even if you live well, breathe the fresh air, look at the beautiful blue sky, and sleep well where no one will ever disturb you. How long has it been since you had a good rest? 1 month? 10 months? It was still 10 years. Chapter 2895. Many people think that being a superstar idol is extremely lucky. With a high income that ordinary people can only dream of, they enjoy an elegant life that ordinary people don't even dare to dream of. But your life has never been elegant. You're lonely. You can't sleep well, even if it's just a normal night's sleep. You can't eat a proper meal. My heart aches for you. My heart aches to the extreme. I still remember that night when the bad news came. I rushed to the hospital, but I could only see your sleeping face. I was heartbroken. How many decades do we have in life? The 10 years between us is not something that can be measured by mere numbers. This period of time is the most unforgettable period of my life. Yes, you left. You left this world without hesitation and fell into a quiet sleep. I cried and called your name, but you didn't give me an impatient look like before. The dead can't come back to life. The dead are gone, and the living are still alive. I didn't sleep well the whole night. But now, I'm relieved to think that you can finally sleep well. No one will disturb you again. But Xianxia, why is fate so unfair to such a gentle person like you? Goodbye, Xianxia. I only hope that if there's a next life, we'll be lucky enough to meet again. This emotional long Weibo post was written from the bottom of his heart. Many fans cried in despair when they saw it. They cried not only because they were reluctant and touched, but also because they knew that Gu Xingzia's departure had become a reality. Xianxia was gone. Xianxia was really gone. Many fans thought that after Gu Xingzia left America, his manager colluded with the company to tarnish his reputation. However, these conspiracy theories were quickly debunked under the evidence of other fans. My sister is a nurse at that hospital. She's also a veteran fan. She's a nurse in the emergency room. She said that 2 days ago, Xianxia and Unforgettable were sent to the hospital at the same time. Unforgettable eyes were injured, and Xianxia was stabbed several times. 2 of the stabs were unknown, and 3 of the stabs hit his vitals. He stopped breathing on the way here. Apparently, the friend that Xianxia met was Unforgettable. He didn't expect to be attacked by criminals on the way. In order to protect Unforgettable, Xianxia was stabbed when he resisted. I heard about it too. I was still in the hospital at that time, and many paparazzi had already caught wind of the news and were waiting outside the hospital. At that time, all the security guards of the hospital were present, and many police officers were transferred from other police stations to prevent the paparazzi from sneaking into the hospital. Many rumors spread among the fans. Some of Gu Xingzia's fans came from powerful backgrounds. Although they did not have access to everything, it was not difficult for them to find out which hospital Gu Xingzia was in. Many fans believed it to be true. When Huan Yu published the obituary, all the celebrities reposted it. However, Unforgettable, who had a lot of interaction with Gu Xingzia, was the only one whose Weibo was deserted. Many fans scolded her for not caring. They said that she deserved Gu Xingzia's protection and flattery. When such a big thing happened, she did not express her thoughts at all. There were also many fans who stood on Unforgettable side. They argued that Unforgettable was probably too sad to post anything on Weibo. A person's attitude could not be easily measured by a word or two on Weibo. Chapter 2896. However, there were also nurses from the hospital who came forward to expose. What? Unforgettable can't post on Weibo because she's still recuperating in the hospital. To think that Xianxia protected her so much and even lost his life for her. At this moment, she was found to be pregnant. Great, now that she's pregnant, she can rely on her son's status again. The family is overjoyed, but poor Xianxia is lying alone in the cold morgue, and she doesn't even look at him. Once this Weibo post was posted, it quickly became the headline. In fact, not only had Unforgettable woken up long ago, she had also visited Xianxia twice. However, both times, she had secretly gone when no one was around. She knew that the memorial service would be held in 2 days. At that time, Xianxia would be cremated and buried. She felt as if her heart was being torn apart when she thought about how a person who was once alive was about to turn into a thin wisp of bone ash. She only wanted to spend the little time she had left with him. When Yu saw this Weibo post, he was so angry that his lungs were about to explode. However, He did not dare to tell Xianxia. At 6 in the evening, Xianxia sat on the bed and ate fruits with a numb expression. Wuxia was reviewing the company's financial report while eating bread. Gong Jie had also been guarding the ward for the past few days. When Xianxia woke up and saw him, she was a little surprised and shocked. She was so surprised that she did not mention Yunyeqing's matter. When she was covering her forehead, she was not in the mood to care about his health. Her heart was in a mess. When she first woke up, she refused to eat anything. Gong Jie persuaded and begged her in every way possible before she finally drank some millet porridge. When Wuxia returned, the two men were in the ward. One was innocently begging her to drink Chinese medicine, while the other was trying his best to coax her. Only then did she obediently eat her food. It was not enough to rely on nutrient solutions alone. Only by eating on time could she ensure that her body was supplied with nutrients. After all, you are not alone now. Gong Jie reached out and patted her head, his eyes full of affection. For the sake of the little guy in your belly, you have to grit your teeth and eat it. Xianxia listened to him and obediently cooperated. After dinner, Xianxia gently wiped her lips with a wet towel and said calmly, "I want to go to Gu Xing's memorial service." Upon hearing this, the man turned to look at her in surprise. What? Wuxia also looked up at her. "Mommy, you can't walk around now. You can't go anywhere." Yu said immediately. Xianxia curled her lips, as if she had known that they would not allow it. She said helplessly, "I'm just going to a memorial service. Are you not allowing it?" Without waiting for Gong Jie to speak, Wuxia immediately said, "There will be many fans at the memorial service. Not only fans, but there will also be major media outlets and A-list celebrities. The memorial service venue is very big and can accommodate thousands of people. This is only the inner venue. When the time comes, the outer venue will definitely be surrounded by fans. You are now at the cusp of the storm. You shouldn't go. I'm only going to see him for the last time." Xianxia emphasized again and again, "Can't I do that?" "No." Wuxia was resolute. Chapter 2897. Gong Jie said solemnly, "Sister, you shouldn't go. There will be a sea of people at such an event. Even if you don't get squeezed, bumped or hurt, I'm afraid that you won't be able to control yourself. If you start crying, who will be able to stop you? Also, you can't see. How are you going to see him for the last time?" Xiaxia's eyes reddened when she heard this. "Xiao Jie, can you go with me? Even if I can't see him for the last time, I'll send him on his last journey." Gong Jie couldn't bear to reject her plea. He looked at Wuxia and then at her. He sighed and said, "Even if I agree, brother-in-law might not agree to let you go. Moreover, your eyes aren't big enough to see anything. If you get hurt, even if brother-in-law doesn't feel bad, I will." Gong Jie, who was usually as unruly as a lion, was acting like a spoiled child to him. Wuxia glanced at him from the corner of his eyes before nodding in satisfaction. This was probably one of the rare things that he and his brother-in-law could agree on at the same time. Xianxia felt even more desolate when she heard this. Her lips trembled and she said in a trembling voice, "Xiao Jie, if I don't see him for the last time, I won't be able to forgive myself. I only hope that I can be by his side in his last moments. Even if I don't say anything, I can just stand there silently from afar." Gong Jie looked at Wuxia awkwardly. Wuxia didn't insist. Seeing how persistent she was, he took a deep breath and smiled. "If you insist on going, then I have a condition. Let me accompany you, okay?" "Okay." As long as she could go, she would accept any condition. Wuxia wanted to accompany her because he was worried that something might go wrong on the way. Even if something happened, he would feel at ease if he was by her side. At least, she wouldn't be so helpless if she encountered danger again. Since Xianxia was hospitalized, very few people came to visit her. It was not because she was not popular, but because very few people knew that she was hospitalized. She didn't tell anyone that she had an accident and was in the hospital. Other than Gong Jie, Hua Jin, Qin Zhou, several senior executives of the company, and director Ji Lin, almost no one knew about it. No one came to visit, so it was rather peaceful. Instead, she would be able to sleep better. Wuxia agreed to accompany her to Gu Xing's memorial service, which made her feel extremely gratified. Before the memorial service was held, Qin Zhou led some people to pack up Gu Xingzi's belongings. When Qin Zhou was packing up his belongings, he accidentally found his patient's medical report. Medical records? He opened it and read it. Despite the doctor's own scribbling, he could still make out that his condition was worse than he had imagined. Severe anxiety and insomnia? Along with the medical records, there was also a diary. Gu Xingzi never had the habit of keeping a diary, but after reading the first entry, Qin Zhou guessed that the doctor had probably asked him to write this diary. From the diary, he found out that he hadn't slept well for more than half a month. Qin Zhou suddenly realized that Gu Xingzi hadn't slept well for a long time since his last visit. His complexion was extremely pale, and it took a lot of effort to put on makeup. Chapter 2898. However, the media that went to visit him found out that he was using a body double, so they used him as a big shot to hype up his news. As a heavenly idol, Gu Xingzi's every move would be the center of attention. What the media wanted was a hot topic and exposure. As the center of attention, Gu Xingzi's psychological burden became heavier. The doctor told me to write a diary, to record the beautiful details of my life, even if it was a small detail. However, I realized that I don't even have a life of my own. My every move is under the eyes of others. How can there be beautiful details? My dream is to be able to fall asleep when I close my eyes and wake up naturally. If I leave, please don't lock me in that cold tomb. If one day, I really turn into a pile of ashes, please let me embrace freedom. Qin Zhou closed the diary and did not force himself to finish reading it. The more he read, the more suffocated he felt. He continued to pack until he found a video camera and a stack of documents in the drawer. When he opened the documents, he was surprised to find that Gu Xingzi had already drafted his will and distributed his assets. All the rules and regulations were clearly laid out, and they had all been notarized. Gu Xingzi had a lot of assets in Beijing. Other than a few ridiculously expensive prime real estate, he had invested in and developed these real estate. Naturally, other than the real estate, the company's shares had also been divided in advance. Villas, resorts, entertainment centers, production companies. As an artist, Gu Xingzi had a high income. These high incomes were all used for investment. His life was not full of luxury. On the contrary, compared to other male stars, his life could be described as pure and simple. Qin Zhou did not know why he had signed so many documents in advance. What kind of health condition did he have that made him sign so many documents in one go? In his account, half of the 9-figure assets were used for public welfare. Gu Xingzi had already signed the documents for the division of assets. What made Qin Zhou even more heartbroken was that Gu Xingzi's inheritance list included him. A commercial office building in the CBD was under his name. What surprised him even more was that he had actually signed the volunteer donation form. He flipped it open and glanced at it. His pupils violently contracted. Unknowingly, in the blink of an eye, the day of the memorial service arrived. For some reason, perhaps even the heavens felt pity for him. Early in the morning, the sky began to drizzle. The entire sky was gray and the world was dark and damp, as if it was also crying for him. At 10 a.m., the fans arrived at the memorial hall. However, only a few hundred fans were allowed to enter the memorial hall. Moreover, they were only allowed to enter the main entrance. They were not allowed to enter the memorial hall. However, there were still many loyal fans who rushed over from various places and waited outside the door in the drizzle. The sky was dark and the fans were standing guard outside the door. Soon, the funeral car carrying the coffin slowly drove into the funeral parlor. The fans immediately guessed that Gu Xingzi's body was in the hearse. Before the fans came, they had made an agreement with each other that they must abide by the rules of the venue, obey the instructions, and not cause any unnecessary trouble for the memorial service of their beloved idols. Chapter 2899. However, there were also fans who couldn't control their sadness. It wasn't until the funeral car passed by them that the fans collectively burst into tears as if the world had collapsed. There were even crazy fans who went up to hit the car door and wailed, "Xingzi, don't leave us. Xingzi, wake up. Xingzi, Xingzi, sup." Everyone was infected by the desperate and helpless cries as tears streamed down their faces. The memorial hall of Beijing's Hongyang funeral parlor had been fully decorated. Many celebrities sent wreaths. Many celebrities came to offer their condolences. Most of them were artistes who had worked with Gu Xingzi before, and they offered their condolences. At 8 o'clock in the morning, many celebrities rushed to the scene in their nanny vans. It was unknown if they were sincere or if they were just putting on an act. It was as if they were trying to match the atmosphere. Regardless of whether they were male or female, they all burst into tears. After all, attending such an occasion with fans and the media present, if they didn't shed a single tear, they would be reported as cold-blooded by the media and accused by the fans of having a heart of stone. This was especially so for Lin Ji. Even though she wasn't on the invitation list for the memorial, she knew that this was a rare opportunity to create hype. Gu Xingzia's memorial service was extremely sensational. More than 100 media outlets would attend, and there would be overwhelming coverage. If she were to participate, she would definitely be able to gain a lot of exposure. Of course, she had to put on an act. Her acting skills were not bad, to begin with. It was not difficult for her to shed a few tears. Therefore, as soon as she got out of the nanny van, Lin Ji covered her face with a handkerchief. Her eyes were red, and her emotions had been brewing on the way here. After getting out of the car, she was supported by her assistant as she cried all the way to the memorial hall. Xianxia stood at the door, dressed in black. When he suddenly saw Lin Ji walking towards the memorial hall, he was stunned for a moment and quickly gritted his teeth in anger. This Lin Ji, even at this time, she still didn't forget to create hype. When Lin Ji walked to his side, he warned her fiercely, "Since you're uninvited, please don't cause trouble at the memorial service. Otherwise, I'll definitely ban you." Lin Ji was shocked by Xianxia's threatening words. She said aggrievedly, "I'm sincerely here to send Xianxia off. I've always respected Senior Xianxia for so many years. That's for the best." After Xianxia finished speaking, he no longer looked at her. Lin Ji patted her chest lightly, wiped her tears guiltily, and walked into the venue. Outside the door, the fans followed the arrangement of the venue staff and lined up. There were only 20 minutes left before the memorial service began. Some of them couldn't help but discuss among themselves. "Do you think Xianxia will come today?" "I think so." After all, she had starred in her first film with Gu Xingzia as the male and female lead. Moreover, they had acted in a reality show together as imaginary lovers. Moreover, the recently completed production of Extreme Youth was co-starred by her and Gu Xingzia. She should be coming. If it weren't for Xianxia, Xianxia definitely wouldn't have become so popular. I like her because she acted with Xianxia in The Green Apple. If it weren't for Xianxia, who would have noticed her? Chapter 2900. Just as the fans were discussing animatedly, a nanny van sped through the entrance of the funeral parlor. Everyone couldn't help but look over. The black Mercedes-Benz stopped steadily. In the car, Xianxia leaned against the back seat uneasily. She felt the car stop and couldn't help but feel even more nervous. She was wearing a black dress today. For today's memorial service, the Gongjie had accompanied her and specially bought a simple but elegant black dress. She didn't have any makeup on. There weren't many embellishments on her clear face. She only wore a pair of black sunglasses to block out the wind and light. Because of her eye injury, the doctor didn't say much when he found out that she was going to attend the memorial service. Instead, he repeatedly asked her to wear sunglasses. Her eyes had become extremely fragile now. Even a weak wind would cause further damage to her eyes. Xianxia obeyed him obediently. "Have we arrived?" she asked carefully, keeping her voice very low. Wuxia said, "Yes, we're here. Wait a moment." He opened the car door first. When the media saw that it was him, they all crowded around and went crazy for the license plates. When Wuxia saw the media surrounding them with their cameras, he thought that these strong spotlights would definitely cause damage to her eyes. Hence, he immediately ordered the bodyguards that he had brought along with him to separate the media reporters. When the media saw that he had come prepared with 2 strong bodyguards, they naturally didn't dare to be presumptuous. Moreover, in such an occasion, if the artiste wasn't willing to cooperate, they wouldn't be persistent. Hence, they obediently retreated to the side and didn't make things difficult for them. Wuxia turned around and held Xianxia's hand, helping her out of the car. Her eyesight was already very low and she was close to blindness. However, with the weak light, she could still distinguish some things. After she got out of the car and steadied herself, she held his arm and said in a hoarse voice, "Let's go in." When the fans saw Xianxia holding Wuxia's arm and walking over, they couldn't help but get excited. "Look, it's really Xianxia." Is she not wearing any makeup? I think she's barefaced, but she's still so pretty. Her skin is so fair, without any blemishes. Yes. I admit that I was scared. She's elegant and pretty. But why is she wearing sunglasses? Many celebrities wear sunglasses. One of the fans suddenly said angrily, "If you wear sunglasses, won't you be able to hide your indifference?" When attending funerals, many celebrities would wear sunglasses. However, the situation of wearing sunglasses was different. In some cases, it was to hide the traces of their true sadness. When a celebrity passed away, celebrities from all walks of life would attend the funeral. Some were unrelated, while some were related, but the depth of their relationship was different. After all, some were close friends, and some were just friends who had acted in the same movie together. Needless to say, those celebrities who were close to the deceased were grieving. Those who were deeply in love with the deceased did not eat or drink for 3 days, washing their faces with tears all day long. If such a close friend appeared at the funeral, he would definitely look haggard and lose all his elegance. Chapter 2901. After all, celebrities had to rely on their image to make a living. Moreover, there were so many paparazzi at the scene. If someone took a photo of her swollen eyes, it would be too embarrassing. However, most of the time, she wore sunglasses to hide her indifference. Only a few celebrities came for the sake of love at the funeral. More celebrities used the funeral of a big star as an opportunity to show themselves. Because other than the various award ceremonies, the funeral of a big star should be the most crowded occasion for celebrities. In the middle of a funeral, and their feelings had not reached that level, the sadness they squeezed out would look fake no matter how one looked at it. Hence, they could only use sunglasses to hide it, letting kind people think that the pairs of eyes behind the sunglasses that were not even wet were already red from crying. Other than that, it was to prevent sneak shots. Of course, this was also a kind of cover-up. It usually happened to female celebrities. Female celebrities would definitely compete in public, but funerals seemed to be the only place that was not suitable for female celebrities to show off their talents. There was no need for color, nor was there a need for the atmosphere. Once female celebrities gave up on their gorgeous clothes and makeup, most of them would lose confidence in their image. A pair of sunglasses was equivalent to saying that they were in an imperfect state. Because they knew that the entertainment reporters, who were everywhere, would never miss a celebrity's funeral. It was popular for celebrities to wear sunglasses at funerals. After all, as celebrities, they were always acting. When they attended the funeral, they did not forget that they were actors. The fan said sarcastically, "I think she must be here to freeload off the exposure, right?" Ever since her debut, she's been freeloading off Xianxia's popularity. But Xianxia is no longer around. Even at the last moment, she didn't forget to freeload off his popularity. Besides, look at her. Her face is so clean. She didn't shed a single tear. She even came with Wuxia on her arm. Isn't this obviously freeloading off the media's exposure? That's right. I also realized that she didn't cry much at all. Could it be that she's wearing sunglasses to hide her tears? How annoying. I didn't expect her to be such a person. If it weren't for Xianxia supporting her, who would remember her name? Since she didn't have any feelings for Xianxia, why did she reluctantly attend the memorial service? Humph. She must be here to freeload off the exposure. All the media outlets are here for Xianxia's memorial service today. It's such a good opportunity, so of course she wants to freeload. Xianxia, on the other hand, did not hear these whispers. She was not in the mood to care about other people and things at the scene. Her heart was heavy, as if a huge rock was pressing down on her. She tried hard to suppress her emotions and held back her tears as much as possible as she slowly walked into the memorial hall. Jianghu was standing at the door. When he saw her, he bowed slightly and hugged her. Jianghu was inevitably surprised by her arrival. "Why are you here?" Jianghu paused for a moment before adding, "Actually, it doesn't matter if you don't come." Jianghu. Xianxia couldn't hold it in anymore. She sobbed and said, "I'm here to send him off." "Are you okay?" Jianghu saw her in this state. She didn't seem to be optimistic. Not good at all." Xianxia took a deep breath and said, "I'm sorry, I lost my composure." Chapter 2902. Are you okay? Jianghu saw that she was not in a good state. "No, I'm not okay at all." Xianxia took a deep breath. I'm sorry, I lost my composure. Qin Zhou's heart ached when he saw this. However, he could deeply understand Xiaxia's pain. But now, he couldn't comfort her at such a time. Because even he didn't know how to calm his emotions. Don't cry. Xianxia definitely hopes that you can live well and be happy forever. My condolences. She was wearing sunglasses, but it couldn't hide her haggard expression. As soon as Qin Zhou finished speaking, she took a deep breath again, but didn't say anything in the end. Mu Yaja helped her slowly into the memorial hall. In the memorial hall, there were sad sobs. Looking around, other than the celebrities, there were also many A-list celebrities and celebrities. Many female and male celebrities were wearing sunglasses, perfectly hiding the expressions on their faces. However, it was unknown if these sobs were acting or if they were expressing their true feelings. Xianxia stood in the corner with a wooden expression, quietly waiting with her head lowered. For a moment, her thoughts were in a mess. For a moment, her mind was blank. Even though there was a commotion around her, she seemed to be unable to hear anything. Her heartache constantly reminded her of where she was at this moment. Gu Xingzi's memorial service. It was as if a lifetime had passed. Things remained the same, but people had changed. Xianxia clenched her fists tightly and tried her best to hold back her tears. This was what she had promised. She would definitely send him off with a smile. If there really was a heaven and a soul, Xianxia probably wouldn't want to see her tears, right? The memorial service was about to begin. Han Yuyan, on the other hand, was the last to make her appearance. She had deliberately chosen this time. Perhaps it was because she was participating in some fashion week or walking the red carpet of a film festival. She was already used to being the last. Hence, even if it was a funeral, she was still used to being late. When she got out of the nanny van just now, many media outlets saw that she was attending the funeral and surrounded her with their cameras. Yuyan, why did you decide to attend the memorial service today? I heard that after you and Gu Xingzi started dating, your love turned into hatred. The two of you fell apart and stopped contacting each other for a long time. Is attending Xingzi's funeral to bury the hatchet? Amidst the flashing lights, many media outlets pointed their microphones at her. Han Yuyan stood still, faced the camera, and elegantly took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red and swollen because of her sadness. I'm really sad about Xingzi's departure. There are some topics that I really shouldn't talk about. But I deeply regret Xingzi's leaving. I only hope that he can rest in peace. Hopefully, everything will be fine in heaven. Han Yuyan read the interview script that the company had prepared early in the morning and acted with all her might. Her tears moved many of the fans present. I heard that Han Yuyan and Master Xingzi dated for a period of time. In that case, it should be considered as an old love, right? I didn't expect Han Yuyan to be so loyal. She ignored the criticism and attended Lord Xingzi's memorial service. This means that she's sincere to Xianxia. Han Yuyan's tears won the favor of many fans. Chapter 2903. She even pretended to be hurt. After the media interview, she walked into the memorial hall crying and wiping her tears. Her footsteps were soft and she staggered. Her assistant supported her as if she was going to faint the next moment. After entering the memorial hall, without the media following her, she finally let down her guard. She quickly wiped her tears with a wet towel and stood in the crowd. Han Yuyan glanced at the media outside the door and deliberately avoided them in the corner. She asked softly, "Did they take a bad picture of me just now?" The assistant smiled and said, "Don't be afraid. I saw it just now. You cried beautifully just now. When the media takes a picture and posts it online, the fans will definitely be stunned by your beautiful face." Han Yuyan's lips curled into a smug smile. If one could cry beautifully like a fairy, that was also a skill. Many female celebrities were beautiful when they were still, but when they acted in a crying scene, it was simply unsightly. Han Yuyan, on the other hand, had become famous because of her weeping scenes. Unfortunately, this conversation was heard by Xianxia. Just based on the recognition of the voice, she was able to recognize who the voice belonged to. Han Yuyan. Were those tears just now squeezed out for the media to see? Recalling her words just now, Xianxia suddenly felt as if she had swallowed a fly alive. A turbid breath brewed in her chest. It was difficult to swallow, but she couldn't vent it out. She couldn't help but say coldly, You won't even let go of the memorial service. Even if it's Xianxia's memorial service, you still want to use it to create hype. Han Yuyen's back stiffened. She turned around abruptly and saw Xianxia. Just as she was about to retort, she caught sight of the man who was protecting Xianxia like a guardian angel. Wuxia. Why is he here too? Seeing that she had turned around, Wuxia also turned his gaze and glanced at her, but it was extremely cold and indifferent. Han Yuyen shuddered and hurriedly turned around. With Wuxia around, Han Yuyen really didn't dare to have any conflict with Xianxia. The memorial service finally began. The live broadcast began to play Gu Xingzi's music. The first song was a cover of Gu Xingzi's song, Keywords, in his concert. Because of this song, Gu Xingzi won the peak music chart. Love yourself. Someone will love you. That's an optimistic statement. The appearance of happiness I feel so real. Can't find an adjective, silence is masking. Overflowing passion, only the particle remains. Have a kind of steadiness when you say my name, position of fallen leaves. Compose a poem, time is disappearing. Our story begins. This is the first time. Show me that love can be both generous and selfish, you are my keyword. Keywords. Upon hearing this song, Xianxia froze all over. She could still remember the scene of their first date in the coffee shop during the recording of The Love Diary. She had forgotten all the plot, but she had never forgotten it. He walked up to the small stage and sat in front of the tripod piano. He played the song affectionately and sang by himself. I'm not sure. The best way to love, be a verb or noun, I'd love to tell you. The most erotic of feelings, but I forget the words. Sometimes we meet and sometimes we part. Crying and laughing are also matters. I'm not afraid of subtext. Have a kind of steadiness, my name is in your heart, position of fallen leaves. Compose a poem, our story. Just about to begin. This is the first time. To love someone so generously and selfishly, you are my keyword. Chapter 2904. She knew very well that these plots were all according to the script. However, he sang so affectionately and completely revealed his true feelings. Every line of the lyrics was filled with strong emotions, as if they were about to burst out. She pursed her lips tightly, her shoulders trembling uncontrollably. She remembered that there was a gathering in the production team. The director had coaxed Gu Xingzi to sing a song. Gu Xingzi sang, "Excuse me," without hesitation. Now, Gu Xingzi's song was played in the memorial hall again. However, Xianxia couldn't bear it and broke down completely. I lost contact, a dream woke me up, the tears in the corners of my eyes are the traces of your departure. Just when I wanted to cherish, love has expired. First, I am too slow. It's too late, hugging your back if you decide to leave. Why do you want to stay? If you don't plan to stay together, why do you want to hold hands? So you only borrowed from me, but I mistook you for a rainbow that fell from the sky. Once you only borrowed from me. Now, but you forgot to return it to me. Amidst the music, Gu Xingzi's black coffin was slowly carried in. At that moment, the memorial hall suddenly erupted with sad cries. Xingzi! She silently called out his name in her heart. She couldn't see the coffin being placed on the stage, but she could vaguely hear the cries coming from the side. Senior Xingzi! Sob, 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 Xingzi! Many people were calling out his name. However, Xianxia couldn't hear anything. Originally, she could still recognize some of the scenery, but now, she couldn't see anything clearly. The entire world had lost all light and was plunged into darkness. She couldn't hear any noise. In her world, it was so quiet that only the sound of her breathing could be heard. Xingzi, so he only borrowed from her. But she thought he was a rainbow that fell from the sky. Give Xingzi back to me, okay? She prayed in her heart. Her fragile heart seemed to be swallowed by tears. Give Xingzi back to me, give Xingzi back to me. Xianxia couldn't stand steadily. The memorial service began. Huan Yu's higher-ups went on stage to give a speech. On the Gu family's side, it was naturally inconvenient for Gu Jinglian to appear. Hence, the memorial service was handed over to Qin Zhou. Qin Zhou walked up the stage without any manuscripts. He first took a deep look at the black coffin, then took a deep breath and said with tears in his eyes, "In the more than 10 years that I've known Xianxia, I've never regretted not accompanying him properly. I claim to be his close family, but as a family member, I didn't cherish my time with him." There was another sob to be heard. Xingzi has been filming for many years. He's very serious about his work and has invested a lot in it. After many years of filming, his body has suffered from many illnesses. He did not have any family and had grown up abroad. In private, he was a man of few words. Tu to Xingto his Xianxia to his tu to his life. Xianxia to stu Xingto his, to stu to Xing. However, not all stories had happy endings. But I hope that today, at the last moment of his life, he will leave a beautiful memory in everyone's hearts. Youth was like water, coming and going like an arrow. Chapter 2905. In Xianxia's diary, there's a line in the lyrics. Who in the world doesn't feel like a purgatory? I won't cry, I have no dignity to give up. When one day those dreams drown in the sea of people, don't be sad. Let him go, this song will be a funeral. He has left, but I still sincerely wish him a good rest. Following that, Jianghu announced that the guests present would circle the venue to mourn. All the guests formed a long line and slowly surrounded the coffin to mourn. There was a small window right above the coffin. The small window opened, revealing Gu Xingzi's calm and pale face. He lay quietly in the coffin as if he had fallen asleep. Wuxia supported Xianxia and circled the venue in mourning. Xianxia tried her best to open her eyes, wanting to see him for the last time. However, no matter how hard she tried, it was in vain. She really couldn't see. She couldn't see anything. Xianxia. Xianxia took a deep breath and held back her tears. Then she said calmly, "Goodbye, Xianxia. I will live on strong." With that, with Wuxia's support, she walked to the coffin and gently placed a bouquet of flowers on the coffin. After the memorial service ended, Gu Xingzi's body was pushed to be cremated. Knowing this result and thinking that he was about to turn into a pile of ashes, Xianxia's heart ached so much that she was about to suffocate. Wuxia had been by her side from the beginning to the end. Although she didn't shed a single tear, he could tell that she was sad. So sad that she couldn't even shed a tear. He was glad that he was by her side. Otherwise, he was really afraid that she wouldn't be able to get through this. After the cremation ceremony, Jianghu saw that Xianxia wasn't in a good state of mind, so he instructed Wuxia to help her back first. However, when Wuxia helped Xianxia out of the memorial hall, a group of fans saw Xianxia walking out. The fans were crying miserably, especially the music that was playing on the radio. It was extremely tear-inducing. However, when they saw Xianxia walk out, they saw that she was still wearing a pair of sunglasses. She clearly did not shed any tears, but she looked like she was walking unsteadily. She even needed someone to support her. Many fans felt that Xianxia's performance was extremely hypocritical. Many fans were talking about it. You can't even squeeze out a single tear, and you're still pretending to be exhausted from crying. Isn't that too fake? I saw her wearing sunglasses when she went in. Who would wear sunglasses to a memorial service? I think she just can't shed any tears. She can't even cry. If they didn't attend this memorial service perfunctorily, they were just trying to ride on Xianxia's popularity. Shameless bitch. She should touch her conscience and think about it. The reason why she's so popular is all because of Xianxia's popularity. Xianxia, you hypocritical liar, get out of the entertainment industry. Someone suddenly shouted at her. When Xianxia heard it, she stopped in her tracks and looked up blankly. Then, an unknown object flew toward her. She couldn't see anything at all, but Wuxia's eyesight was sharp. He quickly blocked in front of her. An unknown object smashed into his back. With a thud, the object fell to the ground. Wuxia took a closer look. It was a high heel that someone had thrown at him. Wuxia's eyes were instantly filled with anger. He suddenly looked up and glanced at the crowd. His voice suddenly turned gloomy. Who threw it? Chapter 2906. The scene suddenly fell into dead silence. Wuxia shouted coldly, I'm asking who threw it? The lone high-heeled shoe lay silently on the ground. Xianxia immediately grabbed his arm. Forget it. Forget it. Xianxia smiled. Today is Xianxia's funeral. I don't want to make it too ugly. Wuxia pursed his lips. Although he was extremely angry, since Xianxia said so, he did not intend to pursue the matter too much. However, just as he turned around, the fans could no longer hold it in and started to jeer. Many fans started to clamor. Xianxia. UB*TCH. The scene suddenly went out of control. You're happy now. But where's Lord Xianxia? He's lying alone in a cold coffin. Many fans started to surround them. Mu Yaja's heart skipped a beat. He had brought bodyguards with him this time, but there were only 3 or 4 people in total. A few fans lost their minds and rushed towards Xianxia. The remaining fans were also enraged and swarmed forward. Mu Yaja could not stop them at all. He was worried that these fans would hurt Xianxia, so he immediately hugged her tightly in his arms. Many fans rushed over and shoved them, grabbing their clothes, hair and arms. The bodyguards immediately rushed over and formed a circle, surrounding Xianxia and Mu Yaja. In the chaotic scene, many fans lost control and threw the things in their hands at them. Shoes, apples, flowers. Whatever they had in their hands was thrown at her. Xianxia stood rooted to the ground, letting the insults and attacks completely drown her. Even though the fans were crazily pushing her, insulting her, and grabbing her hair, her eyes were still empty and indifferent. "Take off your damn sunglasses." A fan rushed forward and gave her a tight slap. Slap. The sunglasses fell to the ground. The gauze on Xianxia's eyes was also exposed to the air. However, no fans noticed this detail and continued to accuse her crazily. Mu Yaja abruptly pushed away the troublesome fans and hugged her tightly in his arms. His large palm pressed against the back of her head and protected her head against his chest. He angrily said, "Get lost." But no one cared. "I hate Xianxia. Get out of the entertainment industry. Get out of the entertainment industry. Xianxia, you are a vixen through and through. You were the one who seduced Sir Xianxia, used him to climb up the social ladder, and used his popularity to hype yourself up. If it weren't for Lord Xianxia, you wouldn't have such popularity and status. Ever since the Green Apple, you've been using Gu Xianxia to create hype. Until the Love Diary, where you used the lucky couple CP to solidify your popularity. However, you don't even have the basic respect for Lord Xianxia's memorial service. He didn't even shed a single tear. He was even wearing sunglasses. You don't deserve Lord Xianxia to treat you so well. From the Love Diary, I can tell that Lord Xianxia doesn't take care of you like an ordinary senior does for a junior. He really likes you. But Xianxia, what have you done for him?" Xianxia closed her eyes and listened to the insults and accusations. However, her heart was like a dead pool of water, without any ripples. This was her sin, and she deserved it. Chapter 2907. At this moment, one of the fans suddenly screamed hysterically, "Xianxia, do you know what I hate the most about you? I hate it when you pretend to be innocent." Her back stiffened and she turned around abruptly. The fans scolded angrily again. "If it weren't for you, Sir Xianxia wouldn't have died. If it weren't for protecting you, he wouldn't have suffered such serious injuries. He wouldn't even have a chance to be saved. You're the one who caused his death. If it weren't for you, Sir Xianxia wouldn't have died." When Xianxia heard this, her mind went blank. "Xianxia, you don't deserve to live. You're the one who deserves to die. Why don't you die? Why don't you die? Why aren't you the one who died?" Xianxia's face was as pale as snow. Her pale and colorless lips trembled. She suddenly turned around. Her sallow face was devoid of any color. The gauze on her eyes had also fallen somewhere due to the pushing and shoving of the crowd. Her body was in a mess and she was in a sorry state. She bit her lip hard and suddenly smiled bitterly. Her voice trembled as she said, "I'm sorry." The crowd fell silent. Xianxia's hair was scattered messily on her back. Facing the emotional fans, she curled her lips, but tears gently slid down her cheeks. "I'm sorry. I really wanted to send him off with a smile, so I held back my tears. I didn't know. I really didn't know that tears were a form of respect for him. I'm sorry. I wore sunglasses because I didn't want him to see my injured eyes. I wanted him to leave in peace without any reluctance. I'm sorry, it's me, it's all me. I'm the one who deserves to die, and I'm also the one who doesn't deserve to live. But I also want to. If I could do it all over again, or if I could choose, I'd be willing to exchange my life for his. I can't bear for him to leave, I don't want him to leave either." Xianxia continued to sob. "But he's gone. He won't wake up. If crying is useful, if tears can bring him back, I will cry seriously." She apologized to them in the most humble way. Apologized to Gu Xingzi's fans. After Gu Xingzi left, She had so many apologies in her heart. Thousands of apologies, but she had no one to talk to. Her apology touched some of her fans, but the majority of them did not accept her apology at all. Xianxia, stop putting on an act. Do you think we'll believe your words? Do you think they'll believe that you're apologizing sincerely? One of the agitated fans shouted angrily. Xianxia, you are shameless. What was the point of saying all this now? I heard that when you were in danger back then, Lord Xianxia was seriously injured in order to protect you. He didn't even have the chance to be rescued. If it weren't for a jinx like you, Lord Xianxia wouldn't have left us. Give Lord Xianxia back to us. Hurry up and give Lord Xianxia back to us. We won't forgive you. We won't forgive you. Xianxia, die. Die. Die for Lord Xianxia. Chapter 2908. There were even more crazy fans who rushed towards her, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws as they pounced on her. Xianxia, I'm going to kill you. Xianxia was not afraid at all. Even if she was engulfed by this anger, she was fearless. Wuxia looked at her ashen face and knew that she was in such a state. Because of all the humiliation, she must have lost all hope. Hence, she did not even have the basic resistance or excuses. He hugged her, feeling sorry for her. There were fans who kept rushing towards her and attacking her. Wuxia silently bore the attacks for her and protected her in his arms. However, he did not say anything in the end. Based on his strength, these fans were weak and they were all girls. How much strength could they have? They were no match for him at all. However, she felt that she was carrying a heavy burden of sin. She felt that she had let down Gu Xing's fans. Hence, she wanted to bear with all these injuries as atonement. However, he could not bear for her to bear such a heavy burden of sin. Then he would bear it. He would bear it for her. He would bear all these sins for her. He would atone for her. He would bear all these injuries for her. Countless fists fell on his shoulders, the back of his head, and his back like a violent storm. Wuxia remained silent and clenched his teeth tightly. Xianxia suddenly realized something. She lifted her head and saw his forbearing expression. She grabbed his collar tightly. Don't! Wuxia bit his lips tightly and tried his best to protect her. It was as if he had lost all feeling in his body. At this moment, an unknown object flew towards her from not too far away. Dong! She felt a dull pain and Xianxia was hit on the back of her head. It was only when the object landed on the ground that everyone realized that it was a rock the size of a fist. Xianxia's vision suddenly turned pitch black and she felt a sharp pain at the back of her head. Following that, sticky blood flowed down along her hair. Wuxia was so shocked that his face turned pale. His heart ached as he hugged Xianxia's shoulders and cupped her face. Xia. Everyone was shocked by this sudden scene. Who threw the stone? Some fans came to their senses and looked at each other before looking around. Xia. But she couldn't hear anything. Wuxia's anxious voice was drowned out by the noise. She closed her eyes, and her face was as pale as a sheet of paper. It was as if she had been consigned to eternal damnation, and she allowed the angry curses to drown her. At the hospital, Xianxia was lying on the hospital bed. The wound caused by the stone had been bandaged. It was not a particularly serious wound, but for some reason, he had been unconscious for a day and a night, and there were still no signs of him waking up. Wuxia stayed by her bedside and watched over her. He had not slept for a day and a night, and he had not taken care of himself. Stubble had appeared on his chin. After Gu Xing's memorial service, she had not woken up. Perhaps she did not want to wake up. Faced with this cruel reality, she had subconsciously chosen to sleep. She had not eaten for a day and a night, and her body was weak. She had relied on the nutrient solution to maintain her body's needs. However, this alone was far from enough. She was still pregnant, and the fetus in her womb needed nourishment. It was far from enough to rely on the nutrient solution. Chapter 2909. Gong Jie sat by the window. No one knew how long he had been in this position, but he was like a stone statue. 2 days later, after sleeping for 48 hours, Xianxia finally woke up. However, after waking up, she was like a puppet that did not know how to laugh or cry. She was like a puppet without a soul. She was either sitting at the head of the bed in a daze or lying quietly on the bed. Her empty eyes stared blankly at the ceiling. She didn't eat or drink. She didn't know if she was torturing herself or forcing herself. He brought the bowl of porridge over and sat on the edge of the bed. He scooped up a spoonful and gently fed it to his sister. His throat moved a little as he choked on his sobs. "Sis, look at me. Look at me, okay? Have some porridge, even a little bit is good. You haven't eaten for 4 days and 4 nights. Xianxia is already dead, but he definitely didn't want to see you in such a dispirited state. Big sister, wake up, okay? Don't be like this anymore. I want you to be well. I want you to be well." No matter how he comforted her, no matter how he coaxed her, Xianxia always looked out of the window motionlessly. Her body seemed to be frozen, and her eyes were dim without any luster. She didn't know what she was looking at. Outside the window, there was only a clear sky and white clouds. However, in the ward, it was cold, dark, and devoid of any light. The sunlight was so bright that it shone into the windowsill, but it couldn't shine into her heart. She seemed to be dead, and the living thing was just a shell. Her heart had completely died on the day of the memorial service, and it would be difficult for her to come back to life. Wuxia stood at the door of the ward. His back was straight, but there was a hint of loneliness and bleakness on his back. She was in this state every day. When she woke up, she would lie on the bed motionlessly. She didn't eat or drink, and there was no expression on her face. Other than her biological needs, she would never think of getting out of bed and walking around. Sometimes, he would sit in one place for an entire day, not moving at all. Be it Wuxia, Yu, Shaoyi Chen, or even Gong Jie, everyone took turns feeding her. But no matter how he coaxed or lied to her, she just stared ahead indifferently. It was as if all the light in her eyes had been extinguished, and there was no focus in the darkness. It wasn't as if Wuxia hadn't tried to force it in. However, every time he forced it in, he would vomit it out in less than 10 minutes. There was nothing he could do. He really couldn't think of any other way to coax her to eat. Sometimes, she would sit by the window and look out. Once he sat down, the night sky was filled with stars. Seeing that she still refused to eat, Gong Jie put the bowl aside, held her hand tightly, and gently kissed the back of her hand. "Sister, even if you don't want to eat, can you talk to me? I haven't heard your voice in a long time. Sis, you haven't eaten for days, and you haven't talked to me. We promised each other when we were young that even if we quarreled, we wouldn't have a cold war. Are you having a cold war with us now?" Xianxia's eyelashes fluttered slightly, as if she had some reaction. Gong Jie immediately picked up the bowl, scooped a spoonful of millet porridge, and brought it close to her mouth. He coaxed, "Eat a little, just a little." Chapter 29:10. Gong Jie immediately picked up the bowl, scooped a spoonful of millet porridge, and brought it close to her mouth. He coaxed, "Eat a little, just a little." Xianxia's lips parted slightly, but she didn't react. Gong Jie glanced at Wuxia with a helpless gaze. This was the first time that Wuxia had seen him so helpless. "She still refuses to eat?" Wuxia asked in return, but it was an affirmative statement. Gong Jie nodded. "She hasn't eaten for a few days and has only drunk a little water. Just the nutrient solution alone is far from enough to maintain her nutrition." As Gong Jie spoke, he glanced at Xianxia's thin chin with heartache. These few days, she had actually starved so much that her oval face had grown. In the past, she was a standard beauty with an oval face. Her chin was very sharp, but she didn't have an oval face, which made her look beautiful and charming. She was thin to begin with, and now she had lost a lot of weight. Gong Jie was worried that if she continued to resist eating, it would turn into a physiological anorexia. The doctor came to the ward every day to do checkups. She hadn't eaten for a few days, so the doctor said worriedly that if she continued to resist eating for a long time, the most serious consequence would be a physiological anorexia. The most direct consequence would be a prolonged period of nutritional imbalance, and the fetus would stop developing. Then they would have to abort it. The doctor asked them to think of a way to persuade her to eat. She was only resisting eating psychologically, or perhaps she had been too agitated and was in a trance. Hence, she had no concept of eating at all. The unforeseen events of the past few days were really going to break her down. Xianxia had passed away and lost her sight. Hence, she had no concept of the passage of time at all. Usually, Patients like her who had suffered a major mental blow would be resistant to anything, or even reject it. She would reject eating, interacting with others, and being close to this world. Her heart was already shrouded in darkness. But when would this darkness be expelled? The one who started the trouble should be the one who untied it. But this person who started the trouble was no longer around. The doctor was also at a loss on what to do with her. The physical illness was easy to treat, but the mental illness was difficult to resolve. It wasn't that they hadn't tried psychological intervention before. But, no matter how experienced a psychiatrist was, she didn't have any reaction when they sat in front of her. After she lost her eyes, she seemed to have lost her ability to perceive the world. She seemed to be unable to hear anything. The psychiatrist said that she had closed the door to the whole world. He locked himself in the fortress and built high walls, not allowing anyone to enter. The doctor told them to feed her as much as possible. Otherwise, the situation would not be optimistic. Whether it was Yu, Xiao Chen, Gong Jia, or even Mu Yaja, they were all locked out. Mu Yaja walked to the bedside and took over his work. He took the bowl and brought a spoonful of porridge to her mouth. Sure, eat a little, even if it's just one bite. Xianxia stared at him in a daze, but her empty eyes were clearly not looking at him. It was as if she was looking through his body, and he did not know what she was looking at. He also did not know what she was thinking. A great sense of helplessness and panic filled his heart. Mu Yaja said in a hoarse voice, "Do you have to torture yourself like this before you're satisfied? Do you think Gu Xingzi wants to see you like this?" Chapter 29:11. Do you want me to beg you? Mu Yaja bit his lips hard. His voice was mixed with pain and confusion. When had he ever shown such a helpless and hesitant look? "I can't lose you." Sure, eat a little, even if it's just a mouthful, okay? Gong Jie couldn't stand it anymore. He walked to Xianxia's side and pinched her cheeks, forcing her to open her mouth. Mu Yaja glanced at him and didn't hesitate any longer. He steeled his heart and forced the porridge into her mouth with a spoon. This couldn't go on. "Did you eat it?" Gong Jie asked. Mu Yaja nodded. Yes, it went in. It was also difficult for these two grown men to put in so much effort to feed her. She wasn't in good health now. After a long period of fasting, her lips were abnormally chapped. This bowl of porridge had just been stewed this morning, so it was hot and hot. Mu Yaja didn't dare to feed her too much. He had to feed her in small mouthfuls. Xianxia seemed to know how to cooperate, or maybe it was a subconscious reaction. She opened her mouth slightly mechanically and didn't spit out the porridge that was forced into her mouth. Instead, she chewed numbly and tried to swallow it. Gong Jie's eyes lit up. She ate it. Mu Yaja was worried that she would spit it out and looked at her in fear. It wasn't until she swallowed that mouthful of porridge that the huge rock hanging in his heart finally fell down heavily. Gong Jie urged again. Continue. He also tried to let go of his hand. Xianxia seemed to have regained some desire to eat. When Mu Yaja brought the porridge to her mouth again, she opened her mouth again and drank that mouthful of porridge. Slurp. The sound of her eating porridge was more beautiful than the most beautiful symphony in the world. Mu Yaja seemed to have received a great encouragement and fed her half a mouthful. Isn't it too bland? Gong Jie added some vegetables and carrots, and Mu Yaja was responsible for feeding them. However, she had only taken a few mouthfuls when her chest suddenly heaved up and down. Xianxia had a pained expression on her face as she suddenly turned to face the trash can. With a retch sound, she actually vomited out the few mouthfuls of porridge that she had just eaten. Mu Yaja looked at her in pain, but the vomiting became more and more intense. At first, it was still sticky porridge that had not been digested in time. Later, he vomited out stomach acid and bile. Gong Jie's heart ached as he watched her body curl up in pain. After she finished vomiting expressionlessly, she stared blankly at the trash can. No one knew what she was thinking about. What are you looking at? Gong Jie hurriedly went to call the doctor. Mu Yaja wiped her mouth with a hot towel and looked at her. She had lost a lot of weight in the past few days. She was so skinny that it was scary. He did not know how she would continue to lose weight. Her waist, which could not be held in one hand, was now pitifully thin. Sure. How can you be so weak? Mu Yaja held her shoulders and asked painfully, What should I do with you? However, she seemed to have lost her ability to speak and did not answer him. When Gong Jia called the doctor over, the doctor first took a look at the food that was fed to her, then looked at the food that she had vomited out in the trash can and shook his head. She hasn't eaten for so long and ate so much at once. I'm afraid she can't take it. Is it a lot? Chapter 29:12. She didn't even eat half a bowl. You call that a lot? Her body functions are different from ordinary people. Ordinary people would be famished after 2 or 3 days of starvation, but she didn't feel anything at all. This means that she is anorexic. Although she has mild anorexia, it's still very difficult for her to eat half a bowl at once. She can only do it step by step. Mu Yaja sat on the sofa in silence, his face ashen. In the past few days, the news of Xianxia attending Gu Xing's memorial service and being attacked by fans had spread like wildfire on the internet. Many fans were trying to figure out the relationship between Gu Xing's death and Xianxia. There were also many paparazzi who wanted to sneak into the hospital and dig up more news. However, the Jianghu financial group had already sent a lot of manpower to guard the hospital tightly. Those despicable paparazzi couldn't get close at all. Although many reporters had given up, there were still some who were still stubbornly waiting. When Jianghu came to the hospital, Xianxia had just fallen asleep. Mu Yaja was gently tucking her in. He walked to the door. The door of the ward was not closed. He knocked gently on the door. Mu Yaja looked over. When he saw him, he immediately walked to the door. How is Xianxia? Jianghu asked about her, but he saw Mu Yaja's gloomy face. He was a meticulous person and probably knew that the situation was not optimistic. She hasn't eaten for a few days. She doesn't eat. She refused to eat after coming back from the memorial service. She didn't feel anything when I called her name. Jianghu frowned. Mu Yaja frowned anxiously. He suddenly thought of something and asked, "How is he?" Of course, Jianghu knew who he was referring to. He has been cremated. Which cemetery is he buried in? Jianghu was stunned for a moment and then said, Jing and cemetery. However, he only kept a portion of his ashes symbolically and set up a tombstone for his fans to remember him. The rest have been dealt with separately. Dealt with separately? Yes. Jianghu responded to his surprise with a smile. Xianxia wrote in his diary that if he leaves this world, he hopes to be free and unrestrained. It was indeed too lonely to trap him in such a small tomb. Yesterday, I climbed up Mo Ling Peak and personally scattered his ashes into the valley from the peak. The wind will definitely take him to where he wants to go. Although he had some reservations, this was Jianghu's selfishness. He should have scattered Gu Xing's ashes into the free wind without exposing himself. However, he was afraid that if that happened, he wouldn't even have a person to mourn for when he missed him in the future. Therefore, a small portion of the ashes were buried in Jing and cemetery. It could also be considered a memento. Jianghu suddenly took out a memory disk from his bag and handed it to him. Mu Yaja took it and frowned suspiciously. What is this? I found it when I was sorting out Xianxia's belongings. There's a video inside. Perhaps it's a memento for Xianxia. Jianghu left. Mu Yaja looked at the memory disk in his hand and returned to the ward. He glanced at Xianxia, who was lying on the bed, and then took a deep look at the memory disk in his hand. Finally, his gaze fell on the huge television screen in the ward. In the darkness, Xianxia vaguely heard Gu Xing's voice. Xianxia? Xianxia. Chapter 29:13. Xianxia. She did not sleep well. Gu Xing's voice kept echoing in her ears like a gentle murmur. Xianxia opened her eyes abruptly and sat up on the bed at once. Xianxia. Xianxia. His voice was so real, as if he was right in front of her. However, Xianxia could not see anything. She tried her best to open her eyes wide and kept groping with her hands. However, she could only hear the voice. She could not see or touch anything. For the past few days, she had not eaten nor spoken. However, when she heard Xing's voice, her heart, which was about to die, seemed to have revived. She was so nervous that it started beating. Xianxia, are you there? Xianxia was in a daze, but there was only one thought in her mind. Xianxia. Xianxia was beside her. She heard his usual gentle voice. She heard it. Xianxia. Xianxia, he seemed to be smiling gently as he called her name. Xianxia turned over and got out of bed. She could not see anything. She stumbled and her knee accidentally hit the edge of something. However, she did not seem to feel pain at all. She reached out and groped around. Xianxia, where are you? She followed the voice and groped around. She heard the voice getting closer and closer. She groped forward, but her fingertips suddenly touched the cold screen. Gu Xingzi's voice entered her ears through the television. Sure. He kept calling her name as if he was not impatient at all. Xianxia widened her eyes and leaned closer to the television screen. She heard that gentle voice say softly, "Perhaps in the future, I won't have the chance to call your name like this again." On the television screen, Gu Xingzi sat in front of the camera. He turned his head slightly and smiled gently. Just like when they first met, his smile was as gentle as the spring breeze. It was even a little uneasy and shy. However, she could not see such a scene. The first time I heard this name, I thought it was a very nice name. It fits the person. Sure, I'm leaving. I need to go somewhere very far. Perhaps in this lifetime, we will never meet again. When Xianxia heard this, she was caught off guard and her tears flowed down. I used to trouble you, didn't I? I'm sorry. In the past, he couldn't help himself. I like you, but some feelings can't be forced. Xianxia. From today onwards I won't. The most regretful thing in my life is that I met you a little too late. I am not reconciled. I firmly believe that love comes first. I want to try hard. But I gradually found that we can't be together. It's not that I came too late. I love you, but you don't love me. Sure, I really love you very much. If I could, I would love you with my life. I hope that you won't be able to live without me. On the screen, Gu Xingzi suddenly smiled and asked gently, "Why don't we make a promise? If there's an afterlife, let's meet again, okay?" Xianxia looked up. Her eyes were hazy with tears. She bit her lip hard and salty tears flowed into the gaps between her lips. Chapter 29:14. I'll definitely find you. Then, we'll be together for the rest of our lives, okay? Xianxia lost control of her tears. She broke down completely and cried bitterly. Gu Xingzi, who was on the screen, seemed to have telepathy. He said frantically, "Don't cry." He said uneasily, "I'm most afraid of your tears." Don't cry, okay? We might still have the chance to meet in the future. After a few years, I'll have let go of this relationship. Maybe I'll appear in front of you with a new attitude. Actually, you don't have to be sad. I didn't know how to fight for it. Since I was young, I've never experienced what kinship and love are. I don't have any special feelings about marriage. At first, I didn't know if this hazy feeling I had for you was love or just a senior taking care of a junior. But later on, I realized that love can really be like a tornado, disrupting one's heartbeat. If I had known that this was love, I would have hugged you without hesitation. But it's all too late. Xianxia covered her face and was sobbing uncontrollably. For the past few days, the dark and gloomy emotions that had accumulated in her chest seemed to have finally been released. Like a flash flood, it broke through the floodgates and became a disaster. No one knew that such an accident would happen. Moreover, no one knew that at this very moment, every word that he said to her, which seemed to be a casual farewell, was piercing her heart. Wuxia stood quietly beside the television and leaned against the wall. His handsome eyebrows were slightly furrowed as he watched everything quietly. He didn't stop her from crying. She had suppressed her emotions for so long. She needed to release them after all. But no one could make her release her emotions. Besides Gu Xingzi, there was no one else. He was the one who was troubling her. In order to cure her, Wuxia could only think of this way. Wuxia glanced at the man on the screen. It was Gu Xingzi's thin figure sitting in front of the camera. His face looked a little pale. Perhaps it was because of the damage to his body that made it difficult for him to maintain his best condition in front of her. He looked extremely weak. There was a thick shadow on his eyelids. Before he decided to leave the entertainment industry, he recorded this video as his final farewell to her. If this accident had not happened, he would probably be in a foreign country right now, and this video would be his last gift to her, given to her by Qin Zhou. However, who would have thought that the final farewell would be a final farewell? Xianxia cried like a child in despair. Gu Xingzi's voice was as light as a feather. Thank you for appearing in my life. Sure. For 2 whole days, Sure stayed in front of the TV, watching Gu Xing's last video over and over again as if she had lost her soul. She didn't get tired of listening to it over and over again. She wanted to hear more of his voice. She missed him so much that she fell ill. She had so many things to say to him, but he couldn't hear her anymore. Her emotions were running rampant, and no one could cure her. She hugged the memory disk and listened to Gu Xing's voice, as if she didn't know what fatigue was. Chapter 29:15. Gong Jie and Mu Yaja took turns to watch over her. Every night, Gong Jie and Mu Yaja would coax her again and again before she would obediently return to bed to rest. However, she still could not bear to turn off the television. She was afraid that if she turned it off, she would never hear his voice again. She knew that whether it was guilt or longing, it was time to let go. He was gone and no longer existed. These videos were also fake. They didn't exist. Gu Xingze was no longer there. However, every time she woke up and heard his voice, she would feel at ease. Everything seemed to have been bewitched. She still refused to eat. She would only occasionally drink some water and eat some fruits, even if it was just a little. Compared to her previous zombie-like state, everyone felt gratified and satisfied. At least, she was willing to try to eat. However, Yu was extremely worried. How long would this mental state last? Xiao Shui also came to the hospital to visit her once. Gong Jie did not let her in to disturb her, so she could only stand at the door and watch her from afar. Shure's mental state was not good. Therefore, not many people knew that she was hospitalized. Mu Yaja protected her very well. He did not let anyone disturb her, nor did he let anyone disturb her recuperation. Xiao Shui was her best friend. When she heard the news, she insisted on coming over to take a look. However, when she stood at the door and saw her in a daze in front of the television from afar, her heart ached so much that tears streamed down her face. How did she become like this? Xiao Shui was extremely heartbroken. Has she been refusing to eat? Yu nodded painfully. Mommy has been refusing to eat. She can only rely on the nutrient solution to maintain her energy. Xiao Shui gritted her teeth. She was extremely upset. Gong Jie stood at the balcony, feeling extremely depressed. He turned around and glanced at Sure. He sighed heavily. Looking at her haggard appearance, Gong Jie's heart was about to bleed. At this moment, the doctor suddenly came into the ward. When Mu Yaja saw him, he stood up and walked towards him. What's the situation? Mr. Mu, why don't you take your wife for a detailed prenatal checkup? His sudden words reminded Mu Yaja that it was time for a prenatal checkup. He returned to the ward, held Shure's shoulder, and asked gently, Sure, I'll take you for a checkup, okay? It's been so long. I wonder how the little fellow is doing. The doctor said that we have to do regular checkups. Shure nodded in confusion. The nurse pushed the wheelchair over. Mu Yaja carried her onto the wheelchair and pushed her to do a checkup. After half a day, all kinds of examinations were done. Mu Yaja pushed Shure to the doctor's office. The doctor was looking at the ultrasound report. At 9 weeks of pregnancy, the fetus has grown to 15 centimeters. The head of the fetus is larger than the body of the fetus, and the various parts are clearer. The head has begun to calcify, and the placenta has begun to develop. The ultrasound shows that the fetal sac almost fills the uterine cavity. The outline of the fetus is clearer, and the placenta is beginning to appear. After the doctor finished speaking, he said, Sigh, this is really troublesome. If she refuses to eat for a long time, it might affect the development of the fetus. Mu Yaja's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? Chapter 29:16. Shure's eyes, which were initially emotionless, flickered a little when she heard this. Her eyes finally regained some focus. How's the little guy now? The little guy is very strong and there's nothing unusual. However, if this goes on, it will definitely have many adverse effects on her body and the child. The doctor paused for a moment and said, even if the child survives in the mother's body, its innate resistance will be weaker after birth. If the mother's mood changes drastically during pregnancy, it will easily cause the child's personality to become sensitive. But I'm worried that if this goes on, the fetus will stop developing and might even have a miscarriage. Miscarriage? Mu Yaja's expression was tense. Isn't there a nutrient solution? This doesn't constitute sufficient nutrition at all. Moreover, emotional fluctuations are also a huge factor. The doctor placed the B-scan film on the backlight. He pointed at a very small ball in the film and said to him, "This is the fetus. It's developing normally and is very strong. A normal little guy won't be able to last until this time." Wuxia stared at the small ball and pursed his lips. His eyes couldn't help but redden. That was his child. Who knew, it might be a beautiful little princess. He had always wanted to have a daughter with her. However, now that this child had fallen from the sky, he felt that this was probably the most beautiful gift that God had given him. But why was it that when he wanted to protect her, he felt a great sense of powerlessness? Wuxia suddenly turned around and leaned over slightly. He held her shoulders and asked carefully, "Xianxia, did you hear that? Did you hear that? If you don't eat properly and don't rest normally, and keep torturing yourself like this, the child will die sooner or later." Xianxia suddenly widened her eyes and her pupils contracted violently. She looked at him but could only see a barren land. "The child? The little guy in your stomach, 9 weeks, she's still so small. Still so small. She's been developing strongly." But his heart ached as he pulled her into his embrace. Over the past few days, he had been suffering as well. For her, and even more for the child in her stomach, how could he not be on tenterhooks? At every moment, he was in fear. Enough. Was that enough? Even if it's a punishment, shouldn't it stop now? A hot teardrop fell onto her cheek. Wuxia hugged her back neck. For the first time in his life, a man who had always been proud and aloof, shed tears in front of her. "Stop torturing yourself, okay? You can torture me or punish me. Stop torturing yourself." He choked with sobs and said, Sure, I love you so much, and I also love this little guy in your belly. Don't torture yourself anymore. Look at me, look at me." He held her face and forced her to look at him. "It doesn't matter how you punish me. The child is innocent. Please don't punish her, okay?" His voice was hoarse and desperate for her response. What he got in return was a teardrop falling from her eyes. Wuxia hugged her tightly. "I can't lose you, and I can't lose her. I don't know what to do with you. Wake up, wake up." He begged her uncontrollably. He begged her to wake up, begged her to open her eyes and look at the fetus in the film. Chapter 29:17. Wuxia's heart almost broke when he saw the tiny ball. Xianxia's heart was in a mess. Back then, when she was pregnant with her first child, she was very anxious. Because she was worried about her family and her father, she was distracted and uneasy all day. Therefore, her emotions were fluctuating throughout the pregnancy. Although she was well nourished, it was precisely because of her emotions that more or less affected the development of the fetus. As a result, she was born prematurely in August. Yu almost died when he was born. Although he was pulled back from the brink of death through emergency treatment, when he grew up, his physical fitness was still quite different from that of a normal child. He was weak and sickly, and he had a sensitive personality. She owed him a lot. However, this child came too suddenly. She was caught off guard and was unprepared. Wuxia carried her back to the ward. Xiao Shui had already left. Gong Jie immediately rushed over and asked, "How's the situation?" Wuxia did not speak. He only quietly carried her to the bed, pulled the blanket over her, and sat silently by the side. Gong Jie frowned and looked at him, then at Xianxia, who was on the bed, and clenched his fists tightly. At this moment, Xianxia suddenly sat up on the bed. The rustling sound startled them. Wuxia and Gong Jie were shocked and turned to look at her. They saw her sitting on the bed and leaning gently against the back of the bed. Compared to her previous wooden expression, her eyes had finally regained some focus. She glanced at them indifferently. Her eyes were dull and there was a hint of embarrassment on her face. Then she said in a deep voice, "I want to eat something." Wuxia was stunned. He did not expect her to make such a request. Gong Jie, on the other hand, was the first to react. He stood up suddenly, his eyes lit up as he walked over and asked, "What do you want to eat?" "Porridge or rice is good. Meat and vegetables should be balanced. Don't have too much oil." Because of her pregnancy reaction, she could not eat anything with too much oil. After not eating for a long time, her body seemed to have gotten used to it. Therefore, she was especially resistant to eating. She didn't seem to know that she was hungry, nor did she feel anything. She wasn't deliberately torturing herself, and she had no desire to eat at all. However, on the way back from the doctor's office, the image of the developing fetus on the ultrasound film flashed through her mind repeatedly when she was pregnant with Yu and Xiao Chen a few years ago. She saw it on the film. It was so small, curled up into a ball. She couldn't even see its features clearly. This was her child. It was their child. Now, the child in her belly should also be that small. He rarely shed tears, but when he heard the doctor say that the fetus was in bad condition, he suddenly lost his composure. He held her shoulders, his heart aching as he begged her to wake up and stop torturing herself. In the end, she was touched. She wanted to keep the child. Therefore, even though she had no appetite, she still took the initiative to ask for food. Mu Yaja's eyes, which were originally dark and gloomy, finally lit up. Gong Jie immediately rushed out of the ward with the cold porridge. When he reached the boiling room, there was still a queue in front of the microwave. How could he have the patience to wait? He rushed to the front and occupied the microwave without any explanation. When the porridge was heated, he brought it back to the ward and presented it to her. Chapter 29:18. Gong Jie said softly, "Sister, the porridge is ready. I didn't heat it up for too long, so it's not hot. You can eat it directly." Xianxia reacted. Her hands fumbled around until she found the bowl of porridge. She held it gently. Mu Yaja immediately reached out to take the bowl of porridge from her hands, wanting to feed her. "I'll feed you, okay?" "I'll feed you." Xianxia immediately came back to her senses and said quietly, "It's okay. I can drink it myself." Mu Yaja frowned. "Your eyes aren't very good." Xianxia smiled slightly and immediately said, "I'm not as weak as you think. I just can't see clearly. I can still recognize things that are closer to me." With that said, she held the bowl with one hand and the spoon with the other. She scooped up a mouthful of porridge and brought it to her mouth. She blew on it gently before taking a bite. It wasn't hot, but it was very warm. However, she didn't have much of an appetite. In fact, she was still repulsed by food. But at the thought of the child in her stomach, she resisted the discomfort and took another big bite. Mu Yaja and Gong Jie looked at her nervously and asked cautiously, "Is there anything else you want to eat?" Xianxia opened her eyes blankly. Hearing this, she shook her head and said, "I don't have anything in particular that I want to eat." She only ate because she wanted to protect the baby. She had listened to everything the doctor said. If she didn't eat, she was worried that it would affect the baby in her stomach. Especially when the doctor said that if she continued like this, it would definitely affect the development of the baby in her stomach. Then, it might stop developing and become a stillborn. In the end, she could only have an artificial abortion. Her current bodily functions were being supplemented by sacrificing her mother's own nutrients. If this went on, it would be difficult for her child to survive. Hearing this, her heart seemed to clench fiercely in an instant. She had been in a daze earlier and hadn't cared about the child in her stomach. But now that she heard that the child in her stomach was in danger, she immediately regained her senses. No, she couldn't let herself go any more. At that moment, she seemed to recall Yu's appearance when he was born. He was lying in the nursery box, small and wrinkled. His entire body was red and his two little hands were curled together tightly. For the first time in this world, this little guy seemed to be very nervous. He only knew how to open his little mouth and cry. Why is she crying so much? She was a little curious. As she thought about it, she gently reached out her hand. The little guy immediately reached out and held her hand tightly. His strength was not great, but his grip was very tight. Perhaps it was due to telepathy, but the little fellow's eyes were tightly shut. He was originally crying non-stop, but the moment he held her hand, he actually stopped crying. Why is it so small? Xianxia looked at it carefully with tears in her eyes. It was said that when he was born, he was less than 2,500 grams. It was simply too small. At that time, tears fell from her eyes. She sighed silently in her heart. The most miraculous thing in this world was becoming a mother for the first time. She couldn't imagine how this little guy came out of her stomach. She also didn't know how these two little guys got along in her stomach for the past 8 months. Didn't they fight? Chapter 29:19. At that time, she was immediately amused by her own conjecture. As she laughed, tears fell uncontrollably from her eyes. The nurse said that it was really not easy to save the child. God knew that if she had not taken a second look at him, she would have missed the chance to save him. That one look gave the mother and son a chance to be reunited. What exactly was motherhood? It was when she saw this little guy that she wanted to give everything she had. She could not wait to present the most beautiful thing in the world to him. She was grateful for God's blessing and thus named him Yun Tianyu. God bless, God bless. God bless. Returning to her senses from her thoughts, Xianxia gently wiped away the tears at the corner of her eyes. She gritted her teeth and drank a mouthful of porridge. It was dull and tasteless. It was like chewing wax. She even had an inexplicable feeling of nausea. Wuxia prepared some side dishes for her. He gently said, "Take your time, don't eat so quickly. You haven't eaten for so long. If you eat too quickly, it will hurt your stomach." Okay. Xianxia lowered her head as she ate the porridge. Her other hand was tightly clenched. "I'm sorry." She swallowed the food in her mouth and mumbled softly. "Previously, I made you guys worry. From now on I'll eat properly." Wuxia was stunned. His lips could not help but curve into a gratified smile. Gongjie looked at her with great relief. His tightly clenched heart finally relaxed slightly. Xianxia suddenly smiled and choked out, I'll be fine." Motherhood was really a magical thing. Xianxia began to eat properly and sleep well. At night, she went to bed very early. In the morning, she would even leave the ward to take a walk in the hospital's back garden, accompanied by Wuxia and Gongjie. It had been too long since she left the bed to walk properly. The doctor said that lying in bed for a long time was not a good thing for the fetus. She also needed to move around properly. Every morning, before going to work, Wuxia would accompany her for a half-hour stroll. After that, he would settle her down and watch her finish her breakfast before going to the company with peace of mind. Every afternoon, he would try his best to arrange everything. At 3 o'clock, he would get off work early and come to the hospital to accompany her. Gongjie, on the other hand, pushed aside all the matters in his hands and handed them over to others to handle. He stayed by her side to accompany her. He had always been an impatient person, but he had always been unconditionally patient with her. Xianxia's mental state also gradually improved. Yu and Xianxia were also very obedient and took good care of themselves. After school, they would come to the hospital and accompany her while doing their homework. Yu's homework was usually done in school. Xianxia, on the other hand, had to look at a pile of homework every day and suffered greatly for half a day. Every time this happened, Yu and Gongjie would accompany Xianxia for a walk, leaving Xianxia alone in the ward to break down. Gongjie was especially excited that she was pregnant. She didn't know what was going on, but this whole family seemed to have a lot of expectations for the little guy in her belly. It'll be great if it's a girl. Gongjie also liked girls. He imagined that if she gave birth to a little princess, he would definitely dote on this niece to the bone. Chapter 29:20. The girl would definitely be very adorable, right? When the time came, he would definitely buy her many pink princess dresses. In order to take good care of her, Gongjie even went out of his way to learn a lot about pregnancy. Yu even mocked him for this. Imagine a person who was almost 1.9 meters tall reading books about pregnancy for a few hours every day. When Wuxia discovered him secretly reading such books, the father and son reacted the same way and even mocked him mercilessly. Gongjie was indignant. "What do you know? I'm reading these books so that I can take better care of pregnant women." Wuxia did not think much of it. However, he did not read the books for nothing. Wuxia saw that the books seemed to be useful to him. At the very least, he had learned a lot about pregnancy. Hence, he also secretly bought a few books and read them. Later on, Gongjie found out that he was also secretly learning about pregnancy and even mocked him mercilessly. When the two men were not busy with their careers, when Xianxia was resting, they would each hold a book about pregnancy and read it with relish. Taking care of a pregnant woman was not an easy task. There was a period of time when her pregnancy symptoms were especially severe. She was especially sleepy during the day and would often fall asleep not long after she finished eating. She would often be startled awake by retching. She would hold onto the trash can and retch for a long time, but nothing would come out. At night, she would suffer from insomnia. Then, in the middle of the night, she would have a craving for something to eat. Sometimes it would be apples, sometimes it would be sour plums, biscuits, bread. Hence, whenever this happened, the two men, Wuxia and Xianxia, with sleepy eyes, would go to the streets to look for food for her. Pregnant women seemed to have a special liking for sour fruits. When she was pregnant with Yu and Xiao Chen, the Mu family had specially assigned people to take care of them. From the beginning, everything was done properly. Hence, her pregnancy symptoms did not seem to be particularly obvious. However, when she was pregnant with her second child, her pregnancy symptoms were especially severe. One night, she had a craving for cherries. Wuxia spent more than 2 hours driving and almost flipping through half of the city before he finally found a 24-hour fresh produce supermarket and bought the cherries she wanted to eat. When she came back with the cherries, Wuxia washed them for her and brought them to her. Xianxia was extremely touched. After calming down to nurture the fetus, the days passed by very leisurely. She didn't have to think about acting every day and night like before. After she calmed down, she could sleep soundly every day until she woke up naturally. After waking up, she would eat breakfast and take a stroll in the back garden. When she felt bored in the ward, Xianxia would silently watch over her. Sometimes, she would turn on the TV. Even if she couldn't see clearly, she could still hear the sound from the TV. She no longer felt so lonely. Gu Xingzi's death was quickly suppressed by Qin Zhou through various channels. At this time, Qin Zhou's true methods were revealed. During the memorial service, Xianxia and Gu Xingzi's fans got into an argument. After that, nothing else happened. After that, there was no news at all. Chapter 29-21. It was actually very easy to suppress a hot topic. The reason why many news articles were so popular was because the media kept chasing them and paying attention to them. For example, Gu Xingzi's memorial service was covered all over the internet. So naturally, it was very popular. When all the media stopped paying attention to this matter, the popularity would die down very quickly. Other than Gu Xingzi's hardcore fans, the public's interest in this matter was limited. If the media did not report it, it would naturally be forgotten very quickly. Qin Zhou felt that the best way to respect Xianxia was to give him some peace and quiet. After spending a lot of money to bribe various media outlets, all the first-tier media outlets seemed to have collectively lost their memories and finally stopped paying attention to this matter. Soon, the entertainment industry returned to peace and quiet. The media no longer paid attention to this matter. Although there were still many fans who were extremely persistent, it was difficult to stir up a storm. On the internet, the popularity of Gu Xingzia continued to fade. On the television, all the programs and advertisements related to him were immediately taken down. During this period, Extreme Youth was also ordered to stop promoting. Qin Zhou hoped that the public would forget about Gu Xingzi's death as soon as possible, so as to minimize the harm to others. Especially Xianxia. Almost everyone thought that Gu Xingzi's death was related to her. Even Xianxia herself thought that she was the culprit behind Gu Xingzi's death. But Qin Zhou did not think so. Just like in the video, Gu Xingzia said to Xianxia, "I am willing to love you with my life." Although this love was indeed a little heavy. Perhaps at that time he did not think so much at all. It was just his first subconscious reaction to protect her. His most selfish thought was that he hoped that she could retain a memory of him in her heart, even if it was just for a second. But he really did not know that it would bring about an unforgettable memory. He did not want to. Lethal Beauty was nearing its finale. Qin Yuyan's ending caused a lot of sighs from the audience. The role of Qin Yuyan was perfectly interpreted by Xianxia. Even Gu Xiaoyang couldn't imagine that a newbie could understand the role so well and perform it with such superb acting skills. In the entire series, she was probably the most tragic character, but also the most realistic one. Qin Chang'e, the female lead played by Lin Ji, had a clear distinction between love and hate. Although she had all the characteristics of a female lead in a period drama, the character of Qin Yuyan portrayed the selfishness of human nature to the extreme. Becoming a demon for love, becoming a fool for love. She had changed from an innocent and harmless young girl to someone who, for the sake of love, had disregarded her own safety and schemed against everything. In the end, she had ended up in a miserable state. Before she died, she cried to the male lead played by Hua Jin, "Do you know that for you, I did everything I could to design this world for you? But in the end, I realized that the biggest mistake I made was, I fell in love with you. You hate my viciousness, but how could I not hate your heartlessness?" But there was no other way. There was no other way. Who asked me to do everything just to get a glance from you, even if it was just a glance? His hoarse cries caused countless audience members to shed tears. A pitiful and hateful character. But more realistic. The selfishness of love and hate was portrayed to the extreme by Xianxia. Chapter 29-22. Xianxia's acting skills were enthusiastically recognized by the audience. The image she created was too vivid, leaving a deep impression in people's minds. Many new fans who liked her because of lethal beauty dug out her humble appearance when she usually went on variety shows. Her gentle and unpretentious personality, as well as her occasionally funny side, made the fans even more fond of this actress with superb acting skills. Hua Jin had flown to Paris because he needed to take a fashion photo shoot. When he returned, he immediately rushed to the hospital to visit. He rejected some of the less important jobs and stayed at the hospital to watch over her when he was free. Soon, the doctor also came up with a few plans. Wuxia and Xianxia came from the hospital to protect the fetus, so the doctor came up with two plans for her. One is to do a cornea transplant first. Recently, there was a cornea donor from Guang City. It was the cornea of a 22-year-old girl. However, if you do the surgery during pregnancy, you will have to bear a lot of risk. However, we will have stricter control of the drugs. However, we can't completely rule out any adverse effects on the fetus. However, it's definitely. There's a risk. Wuxia and Xianxia looked at each other. The doctor looked at their expressions and knew that they could not accept this plan. Thus, he said, the second plan is to give up on this donor and wait until after the delivery. After the birth, when the vitality is restored, we can look for a suitable donor. However, this cycle is very long. With the continuous deterioration of her eyesight, it might cause a lot of trouble in her life. After all, if a person who had always been healthy lost their eyesight overnight, their life would be bound and it would be difficult for them to return to the normal track. And a cornea donor was something that could only be found by chance. It was luck and opportunity to meet one. If they missed it, they might have to wait for a few more years. In these few years, there would be too many variables. Wuxia frowned and said worriedly, "We were going to hold a wedding. Will this situation affect the wedding?" The doctor said sincerely, "My suggestion is not to rush to hold the wedding." When Xianxia heard this, her expression suddenly became a little lonely. The wedding that she had been looking forward to was going to be delayed indefinitely because of this matter. She pursed her lips in grievance, looking extremely lonely. After returning from the doctor's office, she had been leaning against the bed with a gloomy expression. Their expectations for the wedding were suddenly crushed by the cruel reality and nothing was left. Gong Jie saw that she was a little unhappy the moment she came back, so he looked at Wuxia suspiciously. "What happened? The wedding may have to be postponed," Wuxia said as he walked to the bed and sat down. He looked at her and asked, "Are you unhappy?" Xianxia shook her head. "No." However, even though he said that he didn't, the loneliness in his eyes was so obvious that it was about to burst out. "You're saying that you don't, but it's obvious that you're sulking." Wuxia suddenly reached out and pulled her into his embrace. He rested his chin on her forehead and said gently, "Don't be afraid. I'll definitely give you the wedding I owe you." Xianxia was slightly stunned. Chapter 29-23. You may say that you don't, but it's obvious that you're sulking. Wuxia suddenly reached out and pulled her into his embrace. He gently rested his chin on her forehead and said gently, "Don't be afraid. I'll definitely give you the wedding I owe you." Xianxia was slightly stunned. Ever since she got pregnant and stayed in the hospital, her pregnancy symptoms slowly followed. Even the anxiety and emotional changes that were unique to pregnant women were reflected in her body. How terrifying was it for a normal person to be blind? In the past, she felt that things that could be done naturally had become extremely difficult. Usually, when she drank water, she could pick up the teacup. But now, even lying in bed and watching TV for a while had become an extravagant hope. It was common for her to knock things over. Once, she accidentally broke a vase that Yu had given her. She once complained that the smell of disinfectant was the most common in the ward, and it gave her a headache. Hence, Yu specially ran to the florist, chose a vase, put a few fresh flowers in it, and placed it on the windowsill. Realizing that the vase had been knocked over, Xianxia hurriedly reached for the corner and her hand was covered in blood. She had knocked over the vase that Yu had given her. She was afraid that Yu would feel sorry for her. When Gong Jie walked in, he saw Xianxia sitting by the bed. Her hospital gown was stained with blood and she looked a little disheveled. He rushed over and grabbed her hand. "Why is there so much blood?" "Xiaojia. I just wanted to go to the washroom," she said in frustration. "I was groping along the wall and accidentally broke the vase. What should I do? I don't even seem to be able to do the most basic things." Gong Jie laughed and said, "Didn't I send a nurse for you? She went to eat. Didn't you ring the bell? I wanted to try and see if I could do it myself. After all, I'm not used to having someone accompany me to the washroom." She could not even take care of herself. Lying in bed every day, she had no choice but to ask for help even if she needed to solve her physiological needs. He couldn't see. His vision was close to blindness. Everything in front of him was foggy. She was uneasy about the future. When she thought about how she wouldn't even be able to see her own flesh and blood on the day she gave birth, she felt regret and heartache. As a result, he became extremely anxious and even lost his temper for no reason. Fortunately, Wuxia and Gong Jie were unconditionally tolerant of her anxious temper. Even if she was angry, anxious, or even crying because of a trivial matter, Wuxia could still patiently comfort her until she calmed down. Gong Jie replied, "It's only temporary that you can't see. Right now, it's mainly for the little guy in your belly. The doctor said that it's too risky to perform the surgery now. We're not willing to take the risk." "I understand. There will be more opportunities in the future." "What if there's no such opportunity?" Gong Jie replied immediately, "That's impossible. There is no such assumption. Sister, don't let your imagination run wild. You're just too idle every day. With nothing to do, it's easy for your imagination to run wild. Actually, it's not as bad as you think." "I understand." Xianxia immediately said, "Don't worry, I won't let my imagination run wild and make you guys worry." Chapter 29-24. There were many people in the hospital, and the ward was always dark, so it was difficult to get real peace and quiet. Hence, he discussed with the doctor and brought her back to Xianxia to recuperate. Xianxia was an excellent place with good feng shui and was very conducive to recuperation. It was originally built as a resort. After Xianxia was brought back to Xianxia, Gong Jie was finally relieved and decided to return to Hurricane. He had a lot of work on hand that was waiting for him to rush back to deal with. He was worried that his father would become suspicious if he stayed any longer. Gong Jie did not say much goodbye and took a private jet back to Hurricane's headquarters. Xianxia began to recuperate. Of course, although she had more free time, she still found some things to do. For example, what should I name the little guy? At night, Yu and Xianxia were already asleep. Wuxia was reading his email when Xianxia lay on the sofa and muttered to herself, "I have a headache coming up with a name." She was a little troubled. She had been thinking for a long time about the child's name, but she still could not think of a satisfactory one. Wuxia put down his laptop and walked to her side. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her forehead lovingly. "You haven't even confirmed whether it's a boy or a girl, yet you're already in a hurry to think of a name. Aren't you a little too anxious?" "Because it's too boring," she muttered. "I'm at home every day with nothing to do, so I'm thinking about what to name the child after it's born." "Then, you're in a hurry to come up with a name when you know the child's gender? What if you choose a boy's name and give birth to a girl? Then, I'll think of a boy and a girl's name together." Wuxia laughed but went along with her and asked, "Then do you want a girl or a boy?" Xianxia laughed and said, "It's not like I can give birth to a boy just because I want a girl or a boy. This is something that can't be decided." "Then, do you like a girl or a boy?" "I like both," Xianxia said and asked him, "What about you?" "I hope to have a little princess." Wuxia was famous for being fond of daughters. Men had no resistance against daughters. It was said that daughters were the lovers of their fathers in their previous lives. These words were not false at all. Wuxia wholeheartedly hoped that he could have a little princess. He would definitely be overjoyed. By the way, I've always been curious about the meaning behind the name Xianxia. Xianxia was a little curious. It couldn't have been randomly chosen, right? The name she gave Yu was meaningful. She was thankful to the heavens for saving her life despite having a near-death experience when she was born. Hence, She was named Yun Tianyu. Mu Yaja explained. The word Yi means light. Chen was ranked 5th in the earthly branch and was a dragon. Put together, it means a handsome and beautiful person, rational and full of wisdom, a life of elegance, auspiciousness, success and honor. Yun Xianxia was stunned when she heard that. She smiled and teased. Are you really majoring in finance? You seem to know a lot about these things. I did my homework when I came up with a name. You came up with this name? She was a little surprised. Yes. Grandpa wanted to come up with it himself, but I wasn't satisfied. Then, what should I name the little guy in my stomach? Chapter 29-25. I've thought of many names, but I don't know what to choose. The art of naming a person was very profound. In this aspect, Yun Xianxia was very picky. A name was not just a simple symbol. She believed in this art. First of all, the name had to be pleasing to the ear and pleasant to the ear. A name that was unpleasant to the ear, no matter how meaningful it was, would not be liked. She also had to pay attention to the homophony. For example, Du Ziting and Yuling had good meanings, but the homophony made people not know whether to laugh or cry. There couldn't be too many strokes, or it would be troublesome to write. She also had to refer to the zodiac and the 8 characters. The older generation also had to pay attention to the 5 elements of yin and yang. Which ones did you think of? He couldn't help but be curious and wanted to hear her results. If it's a boy, I thought of a few names. Yun Xianxia paused and said, Mu Tianyi, with the meaning of soaring in the sky and achieving great things. Mu Juanhao, with the meaning of a gentleman's heroic spirit. It doesn't sound good. He expressed his opinion. There's more. Yun Xianxia listed many more names. In fact, the names she came up with were not only meaningful, but also pleasant to the ear. However, Mu Yaja didn't like it. Have you thought of a girl's name? Yun Xianxia said matter-of-factly. Of course. Such as Mu Jinghan Mu Yi Mu Yueyao. Yueyao? Mu Yaja suddenly interrupted her. Yun Xianxia raised her eyebrows in surprise and pouted. What's wrong with this name? He smiled. It's very pleasant to the ear. Hey, aren't you a little too biased? Yun Xianxia said with some disdain. You obviously like girls more, so why do girls' names sound pleasant to the ear? Such an evaluation is not fair at all. Who said so? He said seriously, Yueyao is a very pleasant name. Let's call it that. Yun Xianxia said unwillingly, what if it's not a girl? Whether it's a girl or not, it's my decision, not yours. You don't have to worry. Mu Yaja scratched her nose and said confidently, I think that when the little guy comes out, it will definitely be a girl. What? You make it sound like you and your daughter have telepathy. Yun Xianxia was a little jealous. If it's really a girl, I won't have a place in this family in the future. You only have eyes for your daughter. In the future, when father and daughter are united, won't my life be hard? Don't you have Yu and Xiaoyi Chen? She had nothing to say. Aren't the 3 of you united? My daughter and I are of one mind. So what? So you're not allowed to do that? His reasoning was one after another. Good. You're right. You're an old sow wearing a bra, one set after another. Yun Xianxia seemed to have learned this from somewhere. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He suddenly hugged her tightly and said solemnly, Don't worry. You'll always be the most important person in my heart. No one else can compare to you. That's what you're saying now. When our daughter is born, it'll be hard to say. She felt sweet inside, but her words were unforgiving. In the future, when we have a daughter, who knows where my status will be? Mu Yaja said. Really? Thousands and tens of thousands of daughters can't compare to you. Thousands and tens of thousands? You'll have to be able to raise thousands and tens of thousands. Why can't I afford to raise them? Are you doubting me? Mu Yaja suddenly grabbed her hands and leaned closer to her. There's no one that I can't raise. It'll just depend on whether you can afford to give birth to them. Let's not talk about other things. Just based on this weight, I can't give birth. Even an old sow can't give birth to so many. Chapter 29-26. Why can't I afford to raise them? Are you doubting my ability? Mu Yaja suddenly grabbed her hand. Smiling deeply, he leaned closer to her and said suggestively, There's no one I can't afford to raise. Let's see if you can afford to give birth to them. I'm not a sow. I can't give birth to tens of thousands of them. Even an old sow can't give birth to that many. Xianxia said angrily. It's enough for you to have 3 buffoons at home. She patted his hand and said exasperatedly, Stop fooling around, Em. Let's think of names together. I've thought of so many names, but you haven't expressed your opinion yet. Didn't I express my opinion? With that, Wuxia lowered his head and moved closer to her abdomen. He held her belly, which had yet to bulge, and smiled. Yueyao, did you hear that? This is the name that Mommy gave you. Hey! Xianxia didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Are you done fooling around? How do you know that it'll definitely be a daughter? Wuxia said solemnly. Do you believe that it'll definitely be a little princess? I don't believe it. Then let's bet. Wuxia looked confident. Smiling, he said, This is probably the telepathy between father and daughter. As he spoke, he looked lovingly at her lower abdomen. It was as if he could see the little fellow inside through her belly. Yueyao, isn't this name very nice? Daddy likes it too. Yueyao, you must be good in Mommy's stomach. Daddy loves you. Xianxia couldn't see his face at this moment, but she could imagine that Wuxia's gaze was fixed on her stomach. His face must be filled with tenderness. His eyes narrowed, and his handsome brows arched gently. She remembered that he looked especially good when he smiled. His thin lips curved, outlining a gentle arc like water, with shallow smiling dimples. He rarely smiled, and it was only when he was facing her that he would reveal a rare smile. However, his smile seemed to be able to melt even the coldest ice and snow in the world in a single night. Xianxia suddenly smiled contentedly. She felt that at this moment, she was surrounded by happiness. She was a little overwhelmed. Wuxia didn't notice the reaction on her face at all. Instead, he was focused on her stomach. After a while, he leaned forward and pressed his ear against her stomach, listening carefully. After a while, he started talking to himself in front of her stomach, as if he was communicating with a little fellow in her stomach. Xianxia didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She held back her laughter and didn't want to disturb him. Wuxia suddenly raised his head and asked quizzically, Can she hear what I said? Are you stupid? Xianxia couldn't help but say, It's useless to listen to it now. At this time, there's no fetal movement. Is that so? He furrowed his brows, looking disappointed. I thought she could hear me in her stomach. She can't hear you. The child can't even understand what people are saying, let alone a fetus that hasn't developed yet. Wuxia caressed her lower abdomen lovingly with a contented smile on his lips. His gaze never left her lower abdomen, as if there was a rare treasure hidden there. Wasn't it a rare treasure? He had even named it. He said gently, Yueyao, you must be good and don't be naughty. Develop well and grow well. Daddy will wait for you. Chapter 29-27. Pfft. Xianxia covered her mouth and snickered. I already said that she can't hear you now. What are you talking to yourself for? What if she can hear me? He raised his eyebrows disapprovingly and reiterated, There's telepathy between father and daughter. Okay, telepathy. She went along with him. Wuxia gently caressed her belly as he fantasized. If the daughter looks like you, what will she look like? Forgive his limited imagination. The face he imagined was either a miniature version of Xianxia or a combination of Yu and Xiao Yichen's faces. It was very out of place. When Xianxia heard this, she said, I heard that daughters look more like their fathers. Ha! There's such a saying? Of course. Haven't you heard of it? Xianxia said seriously. It said that sons look like their mothers, while daughters look like their fathers. Look, you look so much like me. It's also said that sons are closer to their mothers. Daughters, on the other hand, are closer to their fathers. Wuxia grabbed her face and scrutinized it before nodding. Yu and Yichen do look more like you. Their facial features are delicate, especially their eyes. After a pause, he said confidently, Then my daughter will definitely be a beautiful girl when she grows up. Xianxia laughed. Narcissist. Why are you so narcissistic? This is the truth, he said solemnly. Daughters look like you? I can't imagine that. Xianxia's mind went dark and she could not think of any image. Mu Yaja also fell into a fantasy. His imagination was also a little lacking. In his mind, a baby girl's face covered his features. No matter how he looked at it, it felt out of place. Suddenly, he was shocked by the face that he imagined. She should be very pretty. He felt a little guilty. He did not know what his daughter would look like if she inherited his looks. Xianxia thought about it carefully and said casually, "If it's a daughter, her eyes and nose will be like yours. She will be very beautiful." Actually. Xianxia pondered for a moment and suddenly smiled with motherly gentleness. "I also hope that the little guy in my stomach is a girl." "Ha! You want a daughter too?" "Of course," Xianxia said matter-of-factly. "They say that daughters are sweet." Yu and little Chen will definitely feel aggrieved if they hear this. Mu Yaja's heart ached for the two little guys for a few seconds. If she's really my daughter, I'll definitely prepare a super big walk-in closet for her. Since she was young, I bought many beautiful princess dresses for her. Pink, white, black, and dressed her up like a little princess. However, Mu Yaja